Right now, as you settle into this moment of rest, your mind is preparing for something extraordinary. In just a few hours, you'll begin to dream, and those dreams won't all be the same. Some will feel vivid and real, as though you're living another life. Others will slip away the moment you wake, leaving only the faint impression of color or emotion. Some dreams will replay your day in strange, jumbled ways. Others will take you to places you've never been, with people you've never met. Your brain doesn't dream randomly. Each type of dream serves a purpose, emerging from different stages of sleep, different regions of your mind, different needs your consciousness has in the darkness. Tonight, you'll experience several kinds of dreams, each one a window into the hidden work your brain does while you rest. There are the threshold visions that flicker as you first drift off, the quiet thoughts that process your memories in deep sleep, the vivid narratives that unfold during REM sleep with all their bizarre logic and emotional intensity. There are lucid dreams where you suddenly realize you're dreaming, nightmares that help you rehearse responses to fear, and those strange recurring dreams that return again and again across months or even years. Scientists have identified more than a dozen distinct types of dreaming experiences, each with its own signature pattern in the brain, its own timing in the sleep cycle, its own purpose in the intricate work of keeping you healthy and whole. Some dreams consolidate memories, turning your experiences into knowledge you can keep. Others regulate your emotions, softening the sharp edges of difficult feelings. Some rehearse threats you might face, while others explore possibilities and desires your waking mind hasn't considered. If you're finding this exploration calming, if the idea of understanding your dreams helps you feel more at ease with sleep, consider subscribing so we can continue these gentle journeys together. And if you'd like, leave a comment letting us know where you're listening from tonight or what kind of dreams you experience most often. We're building a quiet community here, and your presence adds to it. Let's explore them together slowly, gently, so that as you drift towards sleep, you'll understand the landscape of your own mind. Every dream type explained, every mystery softened, every night a little less unknown. As we move through each chapter, you'll discover not just what dreams are, but why they happen when they do, what they're accomplishing in the darkness, and how they've been shaping human consciousness for hundreds of thousands of years. By the end, you'll recognize the dreams you've been having all along, and you'll understand the gift your sleeping mind gives you every single night. The moment you close your eyes tonight and begin to drift away from waking consciousness, your brain doesn't simply switch off like a light. Instead, it embarks on a carefully choreographed journey, one that follows the same pattern night after night, cycling through distinct stages in a rhythm as reliable as breathing. This architecture of sleep, this invisible structure that governs every dream you'll ever have, shapes not just when you dream, but what kinds of dreams emerge from the darkness. Your sleep unfolds in cycles, each one lasting roughly 90 minutes from start to finish. This 90-minute pattern repeats throughout the night, typically 4 to 6 times depending on how long you sleep. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. Each cycle isn't identical. The proportions change as the night progresses, shifting the balance between deep, dreamless sleep and the vivid, dreaming state we call REM sleep. In your first cycle of the night, you might spend only 5 to 10 minutes in REM sleep, while the majority of that 90 minutes is devoted to deep, restorative, non-REM stages. By your final cycle in the early morning hours, the proportions have nearly reversed. You might spend 30 to 40 minutes in REM sleep, with only brief dips into the deeper stages. This shifting architecture means that the dreams you have at 2 in the morning are fundamentally different from the dreams you have at 6. The early night dreams, emerging from shorter REM periods sandwiched between longer stretches of deep sleep, tend to be more fragmented, more closely tied to the day's events, shorter in duration. The late morning dreams, luxuriating in those extended REM periods, become longer, more bizarre, more emotional, more story-like. They're the dreams you're most likely to remember, the ones that still cling to you as you wake, the ones that feel like complete experiences with beginnings, middles, and ends. Within each 90-minute cycle, your brain moves through stages that scientists have numbered and studied for decades. You begin in stage 1, that light transitional sleep where you're barely under, where a slight sound might pull you back to waking. This lasts only a few minutes before you slip into stage 2, a deeper but still relatively light sleep where your body temperature drops and your heart rate slows. Stage 2 occupies about half of your total sleep time across the whole night, and it's here that your brain begins some of its memory consolidation work, particularly for motor skills and procedures, the physical knowledge of how to do things. Then you descend into stage 3, what we used to call stages 3 and 4, but now recognize as a single phase of deep, slow wave sleep. This is the most restorative stage, the sleep that makes you feel truly rested. Your brain waves slow dramatically, hence the name slow wave sleep, moving in long, synchronized patterns that look completely different from the faster, more chaotic waves of waking consciousness. During this deep stage, your body does much of its physical repair work. Growth hormone releases. Tissues rebuild. Your immune system strengthens. And interestingly, you do dream here, though these dreams are different from what most people think of when they imagine dreaming. They're more like thoughts, more abstract, less visual, less memorable. After perhaps 20 to 40 minutes in deep sleep during your first cycle, your brain begins to ascend back through the stages, moving up toward lighter sleep. But instead of waking, you enter REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, the stage most associated with vivid narrative dreams. Your eyes move quickly beneath your closed lids, darting as though you're watching something, which in a sense you are. Your brain becomes almost as active as it is when you're awake, lighting up on brain scans in patterns that look remarkably similar to waking consciousness. But your body becomes paralyzed, temporarily disconnected from your motor cortex by a careful system that prevents you from acting out your dreams. Only your eyes, your diaphragm for breathing, and a few other essential functions remain active. This paralysis is a gift, a protection. Without it, you would physically respond to your dreams, running from threats that don't exist, reaching for objects that aren't there, speaking words from dream conversations. There's a rare condition where this paralysis fails, and people do act out their dreams, sometimes injuriously. But for most of us, this system works perfectly, night after night, allowing us to experience the full intensity of dream emotions and scenarios while our bodies rest safely still. After your first brief REM period ends, you descend back into the stages again, beginning another 90-minute cycle, and again, and again. All night long, your brain rides these waves, moving between deep, restorative sleep and active dreaming sleep, between the slow rhythms of delta waves and the quick, alert patterns of REM. This cycling is so fundamental to mammalian life that virtually all mammals do it. Your cat, your dog, dolphins, elephants, mice. The specifics vary, but the basic architecture remains. Cycles of deep and light, of restoration and dreaming, of different stages serving different purposes in the intricate work of sleep. Understanding this architecture helps explain why different types of dreams happen when they do. The threshold visions you experience as you first fall asleep occur in that transition into stage 1. The abstract, thought-like dreams emerge from deep, slow-wave sleep. The vivid, emotional, narrative dreams come from REM periods, especially the longer ones later in the night. Each type of dream has its place in this structure, its moment in the carefully timed progression your brain follows from dusk until dawn. Right now, as you rest here, your brain is preparing to begin this journey again. It knows the path, has traveled it thousands of times before, will travel it thousands of times more. The architecture is built into you, encoded in regions of your brainstem and hypothalamus that have been orchestrating sleep cycles since before you were born. And within this architecture, each dream type waits for its moment to emerge. Let's discover what happens in those first moments when sleep begins, the strange, brief visions that flicker at the threshold. You've probably experienced this countless times without thinking much about it. That moment when you're just beginning to fall asleep, balanced on the edge between waking and dreaming, and suddenly you see a flash of something, a face you don't recognize, a geometric pattern that wasn't there a second ago, a landscape that appears complete and vivid for just an instant before dissolving. Or perhaps you hear a voice calling your name, clear as day, though you're alone in the darkness. These aren't quite dreams in the traditional sense, and they're not waking hallucinations either. They're hypnagogic experiences, threshold visions that occur in those precious few minutes as your consciousness begins its descent into sleep. The word hypnagogic comes from Greek roots meaning leading into sleep. And that's precisely what these experiences are. Phenomena of the transition itself, the borderland between two states of consciousness. They typically occur during stage 1 sleep, that lightest phase where you're barely under, where you could be pulled back to full waking with the slightest disturbance. Your brain is caught between two worlds, and in this liminal space, strange things happen. Neural activity becomes less organized, less constrained by the rules that govern waking perception. Random signals fire. Memories activate without context. The boundary between internal mental activity and external sensory processing begins to blur. Visual hypnagogic experiences are perhaps the most common. You might see simple shapes, spirals, dots, grids, waves of color that pulse or move across your closed eyelids. These are sometimes called phosphenes, and they arise from spontaneous activity in your visual cortex as it begins to disconnect from actual visual input. But the visions can be much more complex than simple geometry. Some people see detailed faces, often of strangers, appearing and disappearing like photographs shuffled too quickly to focus on. Others see landscapes, architectural structures, text that seems to be written in some unknown language. The images are usually brief, lasting only seconds, and they tend to transform rapidly, one melting into another without narrative connection. Then there are the auditory experiences, hearing things that aren't there. Your name being called is one of the most frequently reported hypnagogic sounds, so common that it's almost universal. Scientists believe this happens because the auditory cortex remains partially active even as you begin to sleep, and certain neural patterns, particularly those associated with personally significant sounds like your own name, can activate spontaneously. You might also hear music, sometimes songs, sometimes melodies you've never heard before, doorbells ringing, phones buzzing, footsteps approaching. brief snippets of conversation in voices you don't recognize. All of it emerging from your own brain as it transitions between states, testing its circuits, processing residual activity from the day. Some hypnagogic experiences are tactile. You feel like you're falling, and your whole body jerks suddenly awake, what's called a hypnic jerk or sleep start. These are incredibly common, experienced by somewhere between 60 and 70% of people at least occasionally. What's happening here is a momentary confusion in your brain's motor control system. As you fall asleep, your muscles begin to relax, your body growing heavy and still, but sometimes the brain misinterprets this relaxation as falling, and it sends out a sudden signal to catch yourself, to grab onto something, even though you're lying safely in bed. Your muscles contract sharply, you jerk awake, your heart races for a moment, and then you realize there was never any danger at all. It's a false alarm, a glitch in the handoff between waking motor control and sleeping paralysis. There's also the sensation of floating, of your body lifting off the bed or expanding beyond its normal boundaries. This happens as your proprioception, your sense of where your body is in space, begins to quiet down for the night. Normally, your brain receives constant feedback from muscles, joints, and skin about your position and movement. But as you fall asleep, this feedback diminishes, and your brain's map of your body can become imprecise, unstable. You might feel like you're rotating, like your arms are stretching impossibly long, like you're sinking through the mattress. These sensations are your brain's attempt to make sense of reduced sensory input, filling in the gaps with its best guesses, which can feel quite strange when you're partially conscious of them. What makes hypnagogic experiences different from the dreams that will come later in the night is their fragmentary nature. They don't form coherent narratives. There's no plot, no sustained scenario, no sense that you're a character in an unfolding story. They're more like glitches, sparks, random firings as your neural networks shift modes, and yet they can feel surprisingly real in the moment. That voice calling your name sounds external, as though someone is truly in the room. That flash of a face looks as detailed and three-dimensional as a person standing before you. Your brain, in this transitional state, hasn't yet fully suspended its reality-checking mechanisms, so these internally generated experiences can momentarily pass as perceptions of the real world. The reverse of hypnagogic experiences also exists hypnopompic experiences, which occur as you're waking up rather than falling asleep. The word means leading out of sleep, and these follow the same patterns: brief visions, sounds, sensations that occur in that fuzzy borderland as consciousness returns. Some people see shadows moving in their room, hear conversations continuing from dreams, feel presences nearby. These are simply the mirror image of the threshold visions, your brain making the transition in the opposite direction, moving from sleep back into waking, with the same potential for confusion and overlap between internal mental activity and external awareness. Interestingly, hypnagogic experiences have fascinated artists, inventors, and scientists throughout history. Salvador Dalí deliberately induced them, sitting in a chair with a key balanced in his hand suspended over a metal plate, allowing himself to drift towards sleep until the key would fall and wake him, capturing those surreal threshold images for his paintings. Thomas Edison reportedly did something similar, napping in a chair with ball bearings in his hands, waking at the moment of dropping them to capture creative insights from the edge of sleep. There's something about this borderland state that seems to offer access to unusual mental content, connections your fully awake logical mind might never make. For most of us, though, these experiences simply mark the beginning of the journey. They're the first indication that consciousness is shifting, that the brain is moving into its nighttime modes. They're brief, strange, sometimes startling, but ultimately harmless, just the flickers and sparks of a complex system changing gears. And once you pass through this threshold, once stage 1 gives way to stage 2 and deeper, a different kind of dream begins to emerge. The fragmentary visions settle into something more sustained, though still quite different from what most people think of when they imagine dreaming. When you think about dreaming, you probably imagine vivid scenes chasing someone through strange buildings, flying over landscapes, having conversations with people from your past. You think of stories, emotions, bizarre plot twists that make perfect sense until you wake up. But there's another kind of dreaming happening throughout your night, one that's so subtle and abstract that you almost never remember it, one that feels less like watching a movie and more like quietly thinking in the dark. These are non-REM dreams, the mental activity that occurs during deep sleep, and they're working on your mind in ways that are just as important as the dramatic narratives that come later. Non-REM sleep encompasses stages 2 and 3, the moderate and deep stages where your brain waves slow down, where your body does much of its physical restoration, where you become deeply unconscious and difficult to wake. For decades, scientists believed that dreaming only happened during REM sleep, that these deeper stages were essentially blank, dreamless voids. But research over the past 30 years has revealed something different. When people are woken from non-REM sleep and asked what was going through their mind, about 50 to 70% of the time they report some kind of mental activity. It's just not what we typically call dreaming. These non-REM dreams are fragmentary, thought-like, more abstract than visual. Instead of seeing yourself in a location doing something, you might have a vague sense of working through a problem, or a feeling impression of a concept, or a scattered collection of ideas that don't form into images. People often describe them as thinking about something rather than experiencing something. You might have the mental content of work, of planning, of reviewing, all stripped of imagery, of emotion, of the sensory richness that characterizes REM dreams. It's cognition without the theater, mental processing without the show. What makes these dreams so forgettable is partly their abstract nature. Our memory systems are much better at encoding vivid, emotional, story-based experiences than vague thoughts, and partly the depth of sleep from which they emerge. When you're in stage 3 sleep, your brain is producing those large, slow delta waves, synchronized patterns of neural activity that look nothing like the quick, varied waves of waking or REM sleep. You're deeply unconscious, and the systems responsible for forming conscious memories are largely offline. Even if you are having mental experiences during this time, you lack the neural machinery to record them effectively. They happen and then dissolve, leaving no trace. But just because you don't remember them doesn't mean they're not accomplishing something important. Non-REM sleep, particularly the deep stage 3 portions, is when your brain does some of its most crucial memory consolidation work. During the day, you encode vast amounts of information, facts you learned, skills you practiced, conversations you had, places you went. All of this gets temporarily stored in your hippocampus, a small seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain that acts like a scratch pad for new memories. But the hippocampus has limited capacity. It needs to transfer important information to your cortex for long-term storage, and it does much of this transfer during deep sleep. The process is remarkable. During deep, non-REM sleep, your hippocampus begins replaying the day's experiences at high speed, sending patterns of neural activity outward to your cortex. Your cortex, in turn, responds and strengthens the connections that represent those memories, essentially writing them into more permanent storage. This back and forth happens thousands of times throughout the night, a quiet conversation between brain regions, taking your temporary experiences and transforming them into lasting knowledge. And while this is happening, you might have those vague, thought-like dreams, mental activity that reflects, in abstract form, the content being processed. Scientists can actually see this memory replay happening. In studies where rats learn to navigate a maze during the day, researchers record the firing patterns of neurons in the hippocampus. Then, when the rats fall into deep sleep, those same neurons fire again in the same sequence, only much faster, as though the rat's brain is practicing the maze over and over, consolidating the spatial memory. Human studies using brain imaging show similar patterns. The regions that were active while you learned something new during the day become active again during deep sleep, rehearsing, strengthening, integrating that new information with what you already know. This is why sleep is so crucial for learning. You can study something intensely while awake, but without the consolidation that happens during deep, non-REM sleep, much of that information will fade. Students who pull all-nighters before exams are fighting their own biology. They're trying to force their hippocampus to hold on to everything without giving it the opportunity to transfer that information to long-term storage. The abstract, thought-like dreams of deep sleep are the subjective experience of your brain doing this essential filing work, sorting through the day's inputs, deciding what to keep and what to discard. The content of non-REM dreams, when people can report it, often relates to recent concerns or activities, but stripped of their narrative context. You might have a vague sense of your workplace without seeing it, or a feeling of problem-solving without visualizing the problem, or an awareness of a person without actually perceiving them. It's as though your brain is thinking about the concepts and relationships underlying your experiences rather than replaying the experiences themselves. This makes sense. Given what's happening, you're processing the meaning and structure of memories, not their surface details. Some researchers believe that the abstractness of non-REM dreams serves a purpose beyond mere side effect. By stripping away the sensory and emotional context, your brain might be better able to extract generalizable patterns, to see connections between different experiences, to build broader conceptual understanding. If you're learning a new language, for instance, non-REM sleep might help you grasp the underlying grammar rules rather than just memorizing individual phrases. If you're developing a skill, it might help you understand the principles that apply across different situations. The thought-like quality of these dreams could be the subjective signature of your brain building abstract knowledge structures. There's also evidence that non-REM dreams are more common in the first half of the night, when deep sleep dominates, while REM dreams become more frequent and longer in the second half. This timing makes sense. Your brain starts the night by working on the foundational processing, the memory consolidation that needs to happen first, and then moves into the more elaborate, emotional narrative dreaming of later REM periods. The architecture supports the function, each type of dream emerging when the brain is prepared to do the work that dream reflects. So even though you almost never remember them, these quiet, non-REM dreams are woven throughout your night, marking the moments when your brain is most deeply engaged in the invisible work of building your long-term memory of transforming today's experiences into tomorrow's knowledge. They're the background hum of consolidation, the abstract whisper of learning happening in the darkness. But there's another kind of dream waiting in the cycles ahead, one that's impossible to forget, one that brings story and emotion and strange, vivid life to the sleeping mind. This is the dreaming most people recognize, the kind where you're not just thinking about something, but living inside it. You're running through a house you've never seen before, but somehow know. You're having an intense conversation with someone who looks like your friend but isn't quite right. You're flying, falling, searching for something you've lost, arriving late to an event that matters desperately. These are REM dreams, the vivid narrative experiences that feel like complete, alternate realities, and they emerge from a state of sleep so unusual, so paradoxical, that your brain becomes almost as active as it is when you're fully awake. REM stands for rapid eye movement, named for the most visible external sign of this sleep stage, your eyes darting quickly back and forth beneath your closed eyelids, as though you're watching something unfold, and in a sense, you are. During REM sleep, your visual cortex lights up with activity, generating images and scenes that feel as real as actual perception. Your emotional centers, particularly the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex, become highly active, infusing your dreams with feelings, fear, joy, anxiety, desire, sometimes emotions so intense they linger after you wake. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for logical thinking and reality testing, quiets down significantly. This is why REM dreams can be so bizarre, why impossible things seem perfectly reasonable while you're experiencing them. The result is a state that researchers sometimes call paradoxical sleep. Your brain waves during REM look remarkably similar to waking consciousness, fast, irregular, varied in frequency. If someone were monitoring your brain activity without knowing whether you were awake or asleep, REM periods would be difficult to distinguish from waking periods. Your heart rate becomes more variable, your breathing less regular, your blood pressure fluctuates. Your brain's metabolism, its consumption of oxygen and glucose, approaches waking levels. In almost every measurable way, your brain is awake and active. Except you're not awake at all, you're deeply asleep, experiencing an internally generated world that has nothing to do with your actual surroundings. But here's the strangest part. While your brain is so active, your body becomes almost completely paralyzed. This is called REM atonia, and it's one of the most important protective mechanisms you have. During REM sleep, your brain stem sends signals that essentially disconnect your motor cortex from your muscles. The neurons that would normally activate your movements are actively inhibited. Only a few muscle groups remain functional. Your diaphragm continues working so you can breathe. Your eye muscles remain active, allowing those characteristic rapid movements, and your heart keeps beating. Everything else is offline. Your arms can't move, your legs can't kick, your voice can't speak, even though in your dream you might be running, fighting, shouting, dancing. This paralysis is why you don't act out your dreams. Imagine if you didn't have this protection, you'd physically respond to every dream scenario, throwing punches at dream threats, jumping up to catch dream objects, speaking aloud the conversations happening in your sleeping mind. It would be dangerous, exhausting, disruptive. There's actually a rare condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, where this paralysis mechanism fails, and people do act out their dreams, sometimes injuring themselves or their sleeping partners. But for most people, most of the time, the system works flawlessly. Your brain can generate any experience it wants, and your body remains safely still. protected from the chaos of the dream world. REM dreams have certain characteristics that distinguish them from the thought-like dreams of deep sleep. They're highly visual, full of imagery and scenes that shift and transform. They have narrative structure, a beginning, middle, and progression of events, even if the logic connecting those events is dream logic rather than waking logic. They're emotionally charged, often more intensely than waking experiences. And they frequently involve social interactions, other characters, conversations, conflicts, relationships. Some studies suggest that roughly 70 to 80% of REM dreams include other people, reflecting your brain's constant modeling and rehearsal of social scenarios. The bizarreness of REM dreams, their impossible combinations, their shifting locations, their strange hybrid characters comes partly from that quieted prefrontal cortex. Without your brain's executive function fully online, there's no inner voice saying, "Wait, this doesn't make sense," or "That's not how physics works," or "That person is dead. They can't be here." Your brain accepts whatever arises, however strange, constructing explanations on the fly to maintain the dream's internal coherence. You might be in your childhood bedroom, that's also somehow your current workplace, talking to your grandmother who looks like your colleague, and none of this seems odd until you wake up and your logical mind returns. Another source of bizarreness is how memories get activated and combined during REM sleep. Your hippocampus remains somewhat active, but it's not working the same way it does when you're awake. Instead of accessing memories in organized, contextual ways, it seems to activate them more randomly, pulling fragments from different times and places and splicing them together. A person from your past, a location from last week, an emotion from this morning, a concern from years ago, all of these can merge into a single dream scene. Your brain is essentially remixing your memory database, creating novel combinations, exploring connections that would never occur to your waking mind. The timing of REM dreams throughout the night follows that shifting architecture we explored earlier. Your first REM period of the night might last only 5 to 10 minutes, occurring roughly 90 minutes after you fall asleep. Your second REM period, arriving after another complete sleep cycle, might be 10 to 15 minutes. By the third and fourth cycles, your REM periods are stretching to 20 or 30 minutes. And in those final cycles of the night, especially if you sleep longer than 6 or 7 hours, your REM periods can last 40 minutes or even longer. This is why your most vivid, most memorable, most elaborate dreams typically happen in the early morning hours right before you wake. These longer REM periods allow for more complex dream narratives to develop. You have time to explore a dream location, to have extended conversations with dream characters, to experience multiple scenes that flow from one to another with some sense of continuity. The short REM periods early in the night are more like dream fragments, brief scenarios that might not fully develop before you cycle back into deeper sleep. But those long morning REM periods are where the epic dreams happen, the ones that feel like complete experiences, the ones you might remember hours or even days later. Scientists believe these REM dreams serve multiple functions. They help consolidate certain types of memories, particularly emotional memories and procedural learning. They allow your brain to process and integrate feelings from your waking life. They might even help you prepare for future challenges by simulating scenarios and rehearsing responses. But beyond any specific function, REM dreams seem to be essential to psychological health. When people are deprived of REM sleep, specifically woken every time they enter a REM period, they become irritable, emotionally unstable, and cognitively impaired much faster than when they're simply sleep deprived in general. Your brain needs these vivid narrative dreams, this time to create and explore its own internal worlds. Right now, as you move towards sleep, your first REM period is waiting a couple of hours ahead, ready to arrive right on schedule. It will be brief, perhaps fleeting, and you probably won't remember it. But as the night unfolds, as you cycle through again and again, your REM dreams will grow longer and richer until you're spending nearly half of each cycle in this paradoxical state of an active brain and a still body. And within those REM periods, different types of dream experiences can emerge, including one that's particularly fascinating, one where you suddenly realize you're dreaming while the dream continues around you. Imagine you're in a dream, moving through some impossible landscape or strange version of your daily life, when suddenly a thought crystallizes in your mind. I'm dreaming. This is a dream. None of this is real. And instead of waking up, instead of the dream dissolving at this realization, you remain there, fully aware that you're asleep, watching your dream continue to unfold around you with this dual consciousness intact. This is lucid dreaming, and it's far more common than most people realize. A state where you become conscious within your own sleeping mind, aware of the dream while still experiencing it. Most people have at least one lucid dream in their lifetime, and some studies suggest that roughly 50 to 60% of people have experienced lucidity at least once. For about 20% of people, lucid dreams happen monthly or even more frequently, but there's a wide spectrum of lucidity. Sometimes it's just a flicker of awareness, you notice something odd, realize for a moment that you're dreaming, and then either wake up or slip back into normal dreaming without that awareness. Other times, lucidity is stable and complete. You know you're dreaming, you remember your waking life, you can think clearly and make decisions, and you might even have some degree of control over what happens next in the dream. What's happening in your brain during a lucid dream is fascinating. Remember that during normal REM sleep, your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for self-awareness, logical thinking, and executive function, is relatively quiet. This quieting is part of what allows REM dreams to be so bizarre and uncritical. You don't question the impossibilities because the part of your brain that questions things is largely offline. But during lucid dreams, brain imaging studies show that the prefrontal cortex, particularly regions in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, becomes more active. Not fully awake level active, but significantly more engaged than in normal REM sleep. You're essentially experiencing a hybrid state. Most of your brain is in REM sleep, generating vivid dream imagery and emotion, but part of your prefrontal cortex has come back online, bringing awareness and critical thinking into the dream space. This hybrid state shows up in brainwave patterns too. Lucid dreamers often display increased gamma wave activity, particularly in the frontal regions of the brain. Gamma waves are associated with conscious awareness and cognitive processing. They're the neural signature of attention and integration of information. During a lucid dream, you're literally in a different brain state than during normal dreaming, a state that combines elements of both sleep and waking consciousness. You're asleep enough to be dreaming vividly, but awake enough to know it's a dream. Lucid dreams most commonly occur during the later REM periods of the night, those long, elaborate dream sessions that happen in the early morning hours. This makes sense. These periods already feature the most complex, vivid, stable dreams, and they occur after you've gotten substantial restorative sleep, when your brain is naturally drifting closer to waking anyway. The boundary between sleep and wake is thinner in these late cycles, making it easier for that spark of self-awareness to emerge without pulling you all the way out of the dream. You might notice you're dreaming because something impossible happens, you're suddenly flying, or you're talking to someone who died years ago, or you're in a place that doesn't exist and some part of your prefrontal cortex activates just enough to recognize the impossibility. There are certain dream signs that commonly trigger lucidity, elements that are so bizarre or wrong that even your dream mind notices them. Reading is a frequent trigger text in dreams, often changes when you look away and back, or appears as nonsense. And some dreamers learn to check text as a reality test. Light switches often don't work properly in dreams, or work in strange ways. Your hands might look wrong, with too many fingers or fingers that shift and change. Mirrors can show reflections that don't match you, or that behave impossibly. These glitches in the dream simulation can serve as cues that wake up your awareness just enough to realize you're dreaming. Once lucidity emerges, what happens next varies tremendously. Some people immediately wake up, the excitement of realizing they're dreaming, or the shift in brain state required for that awareness, pulls them out of sleep entirely. This is especially common for first-time lucid dreamers or in brief early night REM periods. Others maintain the lucid state, but as passive observers watching the dream unfold with awareness, but without trying to change anything. And some dreamers discover they can exert control, making decisions about where to go, what to do, how the dream environment responds. They can choose to fly, summon people or objects, change locations, explore the dreamscape intentionally. The degree of control possible in lucid dreams seems to depend on several factors. Longer, more stable REM periods provide more time to practice and experiment. Prior experience with lucidity helps people who have frequent lucid dreams develop better skills at maintaining awareness and influencing dream content. And individual differences matter too. Some people naturally have more active prefrontal cortexes during REM sleep, making lucidity easier to achieve and maintain. For others, awareness and control remain challenging even when they do become lucid, as though parts of their dreaming brain resist the waking mind's interference. Interestingly, lucid dreaming has been used therapeutically, particularly for recurring nightmares. If you can become lucid during a nightmare, you can sometimes change what's happening, confronting the threat, transforming it, or simply choosing to leave the nightmare scenario. Some therapists teach nightmare sufferers techniques for inducing lucidity specifically during bad dreams, giving them agency in situations where they previously felt helpless. The success rates vary, but for some people, learning to become lucid has dramatically reduced the frequency and intensity of their nightmares. There are various techniques people use to increase the likelihood of lucid dreaming. Reality testing during the day, regularly checking whether you're awake by trying to push your finger through your palm. Reading text twice to see if it changes, or asking yourself, "Am I dreaming?" can supposedly carry over into dreams. Where these tests will fail and trigger awareness, mnemonic induction involves setting a strong intention before sleep, telling yourself repeatedly that you'll recognize when you're dreaming. Wake back to bed methods involve waking after 5 or 6 hours of sleep, staying awake briefly, then returning to sleep during what would be a long REM period. Some people keep dream journals, training themselves to remember and analyze their dreams, which seems to increase the chances of becoming lucid. But lucid dreaming isn't necessarily always desirable or beneficial. Some research suggests that frequent, Prolonged lucid dreaming might interfere with the normal functions of REM sleep if you're too awake and conscious during your dreams. Are you getting the full, restorative and emotional processing benefits that REM sleep usually provides? The question remains open, and for some people, lucid dreams can be destabilizing or exhausting, leaving them feeling as though they never fully rested because some part of their mind was awake and active all night. What's clear is that lucid dreaming represents a remarkable capability of human consciousness, the ability to be simultaneously asleep and aware, to experience dream and reality as knowable, separable states, to have metacognition about your own mental experiences while those experiences continue. It's a window into the flexibility of consciousness itself, proof that the boundary between sleeping and waking isn't as sharp as it seems. Your brain can blend these states, creating hybrid experiences that belong fully to neither realm. As you move towards sleep tonight, you might or might not experience lucidity. Most dreams will unfold without that spark of recognition, and that's exactly as it should be. Normal dreaming serves its own purposes, accomplishes its own necessary work. But there's always the possibility that at some point in those late morning REM cycles, something will seem just odd enough, just impossible enough, that a corner of your awareness will wake inside the dream and you'll find yourself conscious in your sleeping mind. And whether lucid or not, all your dreams will be doing something important, working through the experiences and emotions of your waking life in ways that might surprise you. You spend all afternoon learning a new piece of software for work, clicking through menus, memorizing shortcuts, building muscle memory for where everything lives. That night, you dream about the interface not in any narrative way, not as part of a story, but simply replaying the actions, seeing the screens again, moving through the same sequences you practiced during the day. Or perhaps you spend hours playing a puzzle game, and that night you dream of falling blocks, rotating shapes, making combinations, your sleeping mind continuing the exact activity your waking mind was engaged in. These are replay dreams, and they're one of the most direct examples of how your sleeping brain consolidates the experiences of your waking hours. Replay dreams tend to be less narrative and emotional than typical REM dreams. They're more literal, more faithful to the actual activity, more repetitive. You're not having adventures loosely inspired by your day, you're essentially practicing, rehearsing, replaying specific experiences with remarkable fidelity. These dreams most commonly occur in the lighter stages of sleep, particularly stage 2 and in the earlier sleep cycles of the night. This timing makes sense because your brain prioritizes recent memories for consolidation, working on the freshest information first, before moving on to the deeper emotional and integrative processing that happens later. The phenomenon is so consistent that it has a name in sleep research, the Tetris effect, named after a famous study from the early 1990s. Researchers had people play Tetris for hours, then monitored their sleep and woke them periodically to ask what they were experiencing. A remarkably high percentage reported seeing Tetris pieces, the falling blocks, the rotating shapes, the arrangements and combinations. What's even more interesting is that people with amnesia, who couldn't remember playing the game at all when awake, still reported seeing Tetris pieces in their hypnagogic imagery and early sleep dreams. Their conscious memory was impaired, but their sleeping brain was still working on consolidating the procedural learning, the how-to knowledge of playing the game. This tells us something important about replay dreams. They're not about remembering the experience in the usual sense of recollection. They're about strengthening the neural patterns associated with the activity itself, whether that's a motor skill, a perceptual task, or a cognitive procedure. When you dream about something you practiced during the day, your brain is essentially running the same neural circuits again, reinforcing the connections, making the skill more automatic, transferring it from the effortful domain of new learning into the smoother domain of established capability. Athletes experience this frequently. Skiers dream of navigating slopes, seeing the terrain, feeling the movements. Basketball players dream of shooting free throws, the arc of the ball, the release point, the follow-through. Musicians dream of playing passages they've been practicing, their fingers moving through the sequences, hearing the notes. And studies show that people who have these replay dreams actually perform better at the skill the next day compared to people who either didn't sleep or didn't. Dream about the activity. The dreaming itself appears to be functional, not just a side effect, but an active part of the learning process. The neuroscience behind this involves that conversation between your hippocampus and your cortex that we explored earlier. During the day, when you're learning something new, your hippocampus rapidly encodes the experience, what happened, what you did, what the results were. But this encoding is temporary, fragile. For the learning to stick, for it to become part of your long-term skill set, those patterns need to transfer to your cortex, to the motor regions and sensory regions and association regions that will eventually handle the skill automatically. And this transfer happens largely during sleep, particularly during those stage 2 periods where sleep spindles, brief bursts of specific brainwave activity occur with high frequency. Sleep spindles are fascinating in themselves. They're these little eruptions of brain activity lasting a second or two where neurons fire in rapid, synchronized bursts. They show up most prominently during stage 2 sleep, and research has found strong correlations between the number and intensity of sleep spindles and the degree of learning consolidation that occurs. More spindles mean better memory integration, better skill acquisition, and when people are having replay dreams, when they're mentally rehearsing activities from their day, sleep spindle activity in relevant brain regions increases. Your brain is quite literally rewiring itself, using the replay as a template for strengthening connections. Replay dreams aren't limited to physical skills or perceptual tasks. They also occur with cognitive learning, with problem solving, with anything that engaged your brain intensely during the day. Medical students dream about diagnosing patients, reviewing symptoms, running through differential diagnoses. Programmers dream about debugging code, seeing error messages, working through logic. Researchers dream about their data, their experiments, their hypotheses. The content of your waking focus becomes the content of your sleeping rehearsal, your brain dedicating nighttime resources to whatever seemed most important, most novel, most in need of consolidation during your waking hours. There's also evidence that replay dreams can incorporate improvements, variations, innovations. You're not just mechanically repeating exactly what you did. Your brain is exploring the space around that activity, trying slightly different approaches, making new connections. Chess players who dream about chess positions sometimes discover new strategies. Musicians who dream about difficult passages sometimes wake up able to play them more smoothly. Problem solvers who dream about their challenges sometimes wake with insights. The replay isn't static. It's creative, generative, using the replay as raw material for building better understanding and skill. The intensity and frequency of replay dreams seem to depend on several factors. Novelty matters. You're more likely to dream about activities that are new to you, that your brain is still working to master, than about highly practiced skills you can perform automatically. Engagement matters. Activities that required focused attention and effort are more likely to show up in dreams than passive experiences. Emotional significance matters too. If learning something carries emotional weight, if it matters to your goals or identity, your brain seems to prioritize it for nighttime processing. Interestingly, replay dreams can occur even when you're just observing rather than doing. People who watch others perform complex tasks, who study movements carefully, who engage deeply with visual or auditory patterns, can also dream about what they observed. This makes sense from a learning perspective. Observation is a powerful form of learning, activating many of the same neural circuits as actual performance. Your brain doesn't always distinguish clearly between doing and watching, especially when you're paying close attention, and so the consolidation process can work on observed patterns just as it works on directly experienced ones. There's something deeply practical about replay dreams. They're not mysterious or symbolic. They're your brain being efficient, taking advantage of offline time to strengthen what you learned while online. They're the reason you can sleep on a problem and wake up better at it. The reason practice followed by rest is more effective than practice alone. The reason that adequate sleep is non-negotiable for anyone trying to master a new skill. The replay happens whether you remember the dreams or not. The consolidation occurs beneath consciousness, in the silent automation of neural strengthening. As the night progresses, as your brain moves through its cycles and shifts its priorities, replay dreams typically fade and other types of dreams emerge. The literal rehearsal of recent experiences gives way to more abstract processing, to emotional integration, to the strange symbolic dream work that seems less about specific memories and more about broader patterns, deeper concerns, the underlying emotional landscape of your life. Let's turn there next, to the dreams that aren't about what you did, but about how you feel. You wake up remembering a dream about an argument, not necessarily an argument that happened in real life, but one that feels emotionally true. Maybe you were confronting someone about something you've never actually spoken about while awake. Maybe the other person was someone from your past, or a blend of several people, or even a stranger who somehow represented something important. The scenario might have been unrealistic, the setting impossible, but the emotions were vivid and real: frustration, hurt, anger, resolution. This is emotional processing, dreaming, and it's one of the most important functions your sleeping mind performs, taking the raw feelings of your waking life and working through them in the safe theater of sleep. REM sleep, particularly in the middle and later cycles of the night, appears to be specialized for emotional regulation. Studies have shown that people who get adequate REM sleep handle emotional challenges better the next day. They're less reactive to negative stimuli, better able to recognize subtle emotional expressions in others, more resilient when facing stressful situations. Conversely, when REM sleep is disrupted or insufficient, emotional regulation suffers. People become more irritable, more prone to anxiety, more likely to perceive neutral situations as threatening. It's as though REM sleep recalibrates your emotional system, resetting your baseline so you can face the next day with appropriate rather than exaggerated responses. What's happening during these emotional processing dreams involves a fascinating collaboration between brain regions. Your amygdala, the almond-shaped structure deep in your brain that processes emotional significance and threat detection, becomes highly active during REM sleep. At the same time, your prefrontal cortex remains relatively quiet, which means you're experiencing emotions intensely without the usual top-down regulation and logical analysis. But here's what's remarkable. During REM sleep, the stress neurochemistry that normally accompanies strong emotions when you're awake is largely absent. Norepinephrine, the chemical associated with the physical stress response, drops to its lowest levels during REM. You're reactivating emotional memories and working through emotional scenarios, but you're doing it in a neurochemical environment that's fundamentally safe. This combination, high emotional processing with low stress chemistry, seems to be exactly what allows REM sleep to have its therapeutic effect. You're revisiting difficult feelings, replaying conflicts, exploring fears and anxieties, but without the full stress response that would normally accompany those experiences. It's like exposure therapy happening naturally every night. Your brain bringing up challenging emotional content in a context where it can be processed and integrated without becoming overwhelming or traumatizing. The emotional memory gets reactivated, examined from different angles, connected to other memories and experiences, and then restored in a slightly modified form, still accessible, but less raw, less immediately distressing. Emotional processing dreams often don't replay actual events literally. Instead, they use metaphor, symbolism, scenarios that capture the emotional essence of your concerns. You might dream about being unprepared for a test when you're actually anxious about a work presentation. You might dream about being chased when you're dealing with avoidance of a difficult conversation. You might dream about losing something valuable when you're processing grief or fear of loss. The specific content of the dream serves as a kind of emotional theater, a way for your brain to work with feelings without being constrained by literal reality. This symbolic processing might actually be more effective than literal replay. When you dream about being chased, rather than dreaming directly about the situation you're avoiding, your brain can explore the feeling of being pursued, of needing to escape, of fear and urgency in a more general way. This might help you develop emotional skills and resilience that apply across multiple situations rather than being tied to one specific circumstance. The abstraction allows for broader learning, more flexible emotional adaptation. You're not just processing one event. You're processing the category of emotions that event represents. Research on dreaming and emotional processing has found some striking patterns. People who experience trauma often have dreams about threat and danger in the nights and weeks following the traumatic event. These aren't always literal replays of the trauma. In fact, they're often more generalized threat scenarios, but they correlate with better emotional recovery over time. It's as though the dreaming mind is working overtime to process and integrate the overwhelming emotional experience, using repeated exposure in the safe context of REM sleep to gradually reduce the emotional charge of the memories. When this process works well, the trauma becomes less intrusive over time. When it doesn't work well, when the nightmares become too intense or too literal, or when REM sleep itself is disrupted, trauma symptoms can persist and even worsen. Relationship dynamics feature prominently in emotional processing dreams. You might dream about conversations you need to have but haven't, conflicts you're avoiding, connections you're longing for. The other people in these dreams might be accurate representations of actual people in your life, or they might be composites, amalgamations of different relationships, or symbolic figures representing certain emotional themes. What matters isn't the accuracy of the representation, but the emotional work being done. Your brain is rehearsing social scenarios, exploring different emotional responses, working through relationship tensions in a space where there are no real-world consequences. One of the most consistent findings in dream research is that negative emotions are more common in dreams than positive ones. Anxiety, fear, frustration, and sadness show up more frequently than joy, contentment, or love. This isn't because dreaming makes you feel worse, quite the opposite. It's because your brain preferentially processes challenging emotions during sleep, dedicating resources to the feelings that need the most work, the situations that carry the most unresolved tension. The negative emotional content of dreams reflects your brain doing its job, focusing on what needs attention rather than on what's already settled and comfortable. But positive emotions do appear in dreams, particularly in scenarios involving reunion, success, connection, or resolution. You might dream about reconciling with someone after a conflict, achieving something you've been working toward, or being with people you love in peaceful, happy settings. These dreams might serve a different function, not processing difficult emotions, but reinforcing positive ones, strengthening social bonds through mental rehearsal, building optimism and motivation. They're reminders of what matters to you, reflections of your values and desires, moments where your sleeping mind explores the emotional landscape of well-being rather than distress. The timing of emotional processing dreams throughout the night follows the general pattern of REM sleep dominance. Early REM periods, when they're brief and interspersed with deep sleep, might touch on emotions but don't develop them fully. The middle cycles begin to engage more deeply with emotional content as REM periods lengthen. And those long, late-night REM periods, the ones that can stretch to 30 or 40 minutes, are where the most elaborate emotional processing seems to happen. These are the dreams you're most likely to remember, the ones that might still be echoing emotionally when you wake, the ones that sometimes provide genuine insights into your emotional life. There's also evidence that the emotional processing function of REM sleep is cumulative and ongoing. It's not as though one night of dreaming completely resolves any emotional issue. Instead, night after night, your brain returns to themes that matter, working through them gradually, approaching them from different angles, integrating new experiences with old patterns, recurring emotional themes in your dreams, the same types of conflicts, the same anxieties. The same relational dynamics might indicate areas where your emotional processing is still in progress, situations that your sleeping mind recognizes as unresolved and continues to work on across many nights. Understanding that your dreams are doing this emotional work can itself be calming. Those anxious dreams, those frustrating scenarios, those sad or tense or uncomfortable dream experiences aren't problems, they're solutions in progress. They're your brain taking care of you, processing what needs processing, regulating what needs regulating, all while you rest. You don't need to interpret them or analyze them or even remember them for the work to be effective. It's happening beneath consciousness, in the automated machinery of emotional homeostasis that runs every night. But sometimes, emotional processing goes too far, tipping from helpful processing into something more distressing. You're being chased through a building that keeps changing, rooms multiplying, exits disappearing, or you're falling from a height that seems endless, the ground rushing up but never quite arriving. Or you're watching something terrible unfold and you can't move, can't speak, can't prevent what's happening. Your heart is racing, real fear flooding through you, even though you're lying safely in bed, and when you finally wake, gasping, disoriented, heart pounding, it takes several seconds for reality to reassert itself. These are nightmares, the dreams that cross the line from emotional processing into something more intense, and while they feel like malfunctions, they might actually be serving an important purpose in your psychological survival. Nightmares are remarkably common. Most adults have at least 1 or 2 per year, and about 5 to 8% of the population experiences them weekly or even more frequently. Children have nightmares even more often. The peak is usually between ages 3 and 6, when nightmares might occur several times a month. They almost always occur during REM sleep, particularly in those long, late-night REM periods when dreams are most vivid and emotions most intense. And they share certain themes across cultures and throughout human history. Being chased, falling, being attacked, being paralyzed, losing someone, failing at something crucial, arriving too late, being exposed or humiliated. The universal nature of these themes suggests they're not arbitrary. They map onto fundamental human fears, threats that would have been life or death serious for our ancestors and that still activate deep survival circuits in our brains. Being chased by a predator, falling from a height, failing to protect loved ones, being socially rejected by your group. These scenarios carried serious survival consequences for hundreds of thousands of years. Your brain is wired to take them seriously, to respond with fear and urgency, to learn from them. And nightmares might be your brain's way of rehearsing responses to these fundamental threats, even when the specific modern versions of those threats look nothing like being chased by a predator. There's a theory in sleep science called the threat simulation theory of dreaming, which proposes that one of the functions of dreams, particularly anxiety dreams and nightmares, is to let you practice responding to dangers in a safe environment. By generating threatening scenarios during sleep, by making you experience fear and urgency and the need to escape or fight or problem solve, your brain is essentially running drills. It's keeping your threat response systems sharp, making sure that when you do face something genuinely dangerous or challenging in waking life, you have practice responses available, your emotions and reactions already somewhat rehearsed. This doesn't mean nightmares feel good or that they're always helpful. There's a difference between the moderate anxiety dreams that might serve this rehearsal function and the severe, repetitive nightmares that can be symptoms of anxiety disorders, PTSD, or other psychological conditions. The helpful kind of nightmare is occasional, varied in content, not too overwhelming in intensity, and doesn't significantly disrupt your sleep or your next day functioning. These nightmares let you process fear, practice coping, and then move on. The problematic kind is frequent, intense, sometimes repetitive in theme or content, and leaves you dreading sleep or waking exhausted and distressed. The neurochemistry of nightmares involves that same high emotional activation we see in other REM dreams, but with the intensity turned up. Your amygdala is firing strongly, your stress-related brain regions are active, and the scenarios your sleeping mind generates are specifically designed to trigger fear responses. What's interesting is that even during nightmares, norepinephrine, the stress neurochemical, remains low, at least compared to what it would be if you were experiencing the same scenario while awake. You're feeling fear, but not the full body stress response that would accompany real danger. This is part of what allows nightmares to potentially be therapeutic rather than traumatizing. You're experiencing fear in a somewhat buffered state. Sigh. However, in people with PTSD or severe anxiety disorders, this buffering might not work as well. Their norepinephrine levels during REM sleep can be higher than normal, meaning they're experiencing dream fear with more of a real physiological stress response. This can make nightmares more distressing and less therapeutically useful. Instead of gradually processing and integrating traumatic memories, they're re-experiencing them with high-stress chemistry, which can actually strengthen the traumatic associations rather than weakening them. This is one reason why PTSD nightmares can be so persistent and why they sometimes require specific therapeutic intervention. Nightmares can be triggered by various factors, Stress and anxiety in your waking life increase nightmare frequency. Your brain has more threatening material to process, more fears to rehearse, more emotional content that activates during sleep. Certain medications, particularly some antidepressants and blood pressure medications, can affect REM sleep and increase vivid or disturbing dreams. Substance withdrawal, especially from alcohol or sedatives, often causes a REM rebound effect, where you get more intense and longer REM periods than normal, which can bring more nightmares. Sleep deprivation can also increase nightmares. Paradoxically, when you're finally able to sleep after being sleep deprived, you often get a surge of REM sleep to compensate for what you missed, and this intense REM period can produce more vivid and disturbing dreams. There's an important distinction between nightmares and night terrors, though people often confuse them. Nightmares happen during REM sleep, usually in the second half of the night, and you can typically remember them when you wake. Night terrors happen during deep, non-REM sleep, usually in the first few hours after falling asleep, and they're characterized by sudden arousal with intense fear, screaming, sitting up, heart racing, but with little or no dream recall afterward. Night terrors are more common in children and usually don't indicate any psychological problem. They're essentially a glitch in the arousal system, where part of your brain wakes suddenly from deep sleep while the rest remains asleep, creating this confused state of intense fear without conscious awareness or memory. Some people develop recurring nightmares, the same scenario or theme appearing repeatedly over weeks, months, or even years. These often relate to unresolved trauma or ongoing anxiety. The brain keeps returning to the same threatening scenario because it hasn't successfully processed or resolved the underlying fear. In some cases, therapeutic techniques can help. Imagery rehearsal therapy, for instance, involves consciously reimagining the nightmare while awake and creating a new, less threatening version of it, then rehearsing this new version before sleep. For many people, this practice can reduce the frequency and intensity of recurring nightmares, as though giving the brain a different template to work with. Nightmares can also serve as early warning signs that something in your emotional or psychological life needs attention. A sudden increase in nightmare frequency or intensity might indicate rising stress levels, unprocessed difficult emotions, or emerging mental health concerns. In this way, nightmares can actually be informative, alerting you to issues that might otherwise remain beneath conscious awareness. They're uncomfortable messengers, but sometimes they're bringing important information about your internal state. What helps with occasional nightmares is often what helps with sleep in general, managing stress during the day, maintaining consistent sleep schedules, creating calm bedtime routines, avoiding alcohol and stimulants before bed. If nightmares become frequent or severely disruptive, they warrant professional attention, as they can be both symptoms of underlying conditions and contributors to ongoing sleep problems and emotional distress. But the occasional nightmare, however unpleasant in the moment, is a normal part of being human. A night when your brain's threat processing systems worked a bit too enthusiastically, generating scenarios that were more intense than necessary, but that still fit within the normal range of dream experiences. Understanding that nightmares serve a function, that they're your brain trying to prepare you for challenges, even if it sometimes overdoes the intensity, can make them slightly less distressing. They're not meaningless torture or signs that something is deeply wrong. They're the far end of the spectrum of emotional processing, moments when your sleeping mind pushes too hard in its attempts to keep you safe. And in contrast to these fear-filled dreams, your sleeping mind also generates their opposites: dreams of joy, success, fulfillment, and pleasure. You're flying not in an airplane, but with your own body, soaring over landscapes, feeling the wind, moving with ease and joy. Or you're having a conversation you've longed for with someone important, and they're saying exactly what you needed to hear. Or you've achieved something you've been working toward, and you're experiencing the rush of success, the validation, the completion. Or you're with someone you desire, and the dream unfolds into intimacy without inhibition or consequence. These are wish fulfillment dreams, where your sleeping mind grants you experiences your waking life hasn't provided, and they're far more common and more complex than simple fantasies playing out in sleep. The concept of wish fulfillment in dreams goes back to Freud, who proposed that dreams represent disguised fulfillment of repressed wishes. Modern neuroscience has moved beyond Freud's specific theories, but the basic observation holds. Dreams do often feature scenarios where desires are satisfied, needs are met, problems are resolved. What we understand now is that this isn't about hidden psychological content needing to sneak past some internal censor. Instead, it's about your brain modeling possibilities, exploring potential futures, simulating scenarios that matter to you emotionally and motivationally. Your desires are important information about what you value, what you're working toward, what motivates your behavior. Of course, your dreaming mind engages with them. Flying dreams are among the most commonly reported positive dream experiences, occurring in roughly 40 to 50% of people at some point in their lives. The sensation is remarkably consistent across reports, a feeling of freedom, of overcoming normal physical limitations, of viewing the world from a new perspective. Some researchers believe flying dreams emerge from your brain's integration of spatial and bodily information during sleep. Your vestibular system, which manages balance and spatial orientation, remains somewhat active during REM sleep, and with reduced sensory input from the actual environment, your brain might interpret these signals in unusual ways. The result is a sensation of movement through space that feels liberating precisely because it's impossible in waking life. But flying dreams aren't just random sensations. They often occur during periods when you're feeling particularly competent, when you're overcoming challenges, when you're experiencing growth or success in your waking life. The content of the dream reflects your emotional state, your sense of possibility and agency. You're not just experiencing arbitrary weightlessness. You're experiencing a metaphor for capability, for rising above problems, for freedom from constraints. Your brain is using the impossibility of flight to represent something real about your psychological state, a feeling of mastery, of potential, of expanded horizons. Success and achievement dreams take many forms. You might dream of completing a project perfectly, receiving recognition or praise, winning a competition, solving a problem that's been puzzling you. These dreams often reflect your goals and aspirations, the things you're actively working toward in waking life, and interestingly, they can serve motivational functions. When you dream of succeeding at something, you're essentially rehearsing success, building mental models of what achievement looks like and feels like. This isn't just pleasant fantasy. It's the same kind of mental simulation that athletes use deliberately when they visualize successful performance. Your dreaming brain does this automatically, strengthening your motivation and confidence. Social wish fulfillment dreams are particularly powerful. You might dream of reconciling with someone you've lost contact with, of being accepted by a group you feel excluded from, of being loved or admired or understood. These dreams tap into fundamental human needs for connection, belonging, and positive social regard. Your brain is deeply social. Vast amounts of your neural real estate are dedicated to understanding, predicting, and navigating social relationships. It makes sense that your dreams would explore social scenarios that matter to you, including scenarios where social needs are met more completely than they are in your waking life. Romantic and sexual dreams fall into this category as well. Dreams involving desire, intimacy, and pleasure are common and normal, and they don't necessarily reflect anything about your actual relationships or behavior. Your brain is exploring the space of possibility, experiencing scenarios without commitment or consequence. Sometimes these dreams involve people you're actually attracted to. Sometimes they involve people you are not consciously attracted to at all, or combinations of people, or entirely fictional partners. The content is less important than the function your brain is engaging, with desire, with intimacy, with pleasure, all of which are important aspects of human psychology, and all of which get processed during sleep, just like any other significant emotional content. What's interesting about wish fulfillment dreams is that they're not always straightforward. Your wishes aren't necessarily what you think they are, consciously. You might dream of something you didn't know you wanted, or discover through a dream that something you thought you wanted doesn't actually feel good when you experience it, even in dream form. Your dreaming mind has access to implicit knowledge, to emotional truths that might not be fully conscious. A dream about achieving a certain goal might feel hollow rather than satisfying, which could be information about whether that goal truly aligns with your deeper values. A dream about a scenario you thought you desired might turn out to feel wrong or uncomfortable, revealing a disconnect between your conscious beliefs and your actual emotional responses. Wish fulfillment dreams can also involve resolution of conflicts or problems. You might dream of finding a lost object, of fixing something that's broken, of making peace with someone you've argued with. These dreams represent your brain's drive toward closure, toward resolving open loops and reducing emotional tension. When something is unfinished in your waking life, when there's a problem you can't solve, or a situation you can't control, your dreaming mind might generate scenarios where resolution occurs. This doesn't fix the actual waking problem, but it might help you process the emotions around it, reduce the psychological weight of the incompleteness, or even provide creative insights that you can apply when you wake. The neurological basis for wish fulfillment dreams involves the same systems that generate all REM dreams: high activity in emotional and visual regions, reduced activity in logical and critical regions, your brain's reward circuitry engaging with simulated scenarios. What makes these dreams feel particularly good is that your brain's dopamine and reward systems can respond to dream experiences much as they would to real ones. When something positive happens in a dream, when a desire is fulfilled or a need is met, your brain releases feel-good neurochemicals. The experience isn't real, but the emotional and physiological responses to it are. You wake from a wonderful dream feeling genuinely good, carrying positive emotion forward into your day. This has interesting implications. Wish fulfillment dreams might actually contribute to psychological well-being by providing positive emotional experiences, by letting you feel things that are rare or absent in your waking life, by balancing out the negative emotions that also get processed during sleep. If dreams were only about working through problems and processing threats, they might leave you emotionally depleted. But the mix of difficult and pleasant dreams, of challenge and fulfillment, creates a more balanced emotional diet. Your sleeping mind gives you both the hard work of processing difficult emotions and the gift of experiencing joy, success, connection, and satisfaction. Of course, wish fulfillment dreams can also highlight what's missing, what you're longing for, what remains unfulfilled. A dream of deep connection might underscore loneliness in your waking life. A dream of success might emphasize feelings of inadequacy or stagnation. In this way, these dreams can be bittersweet, offering temporary satisfaction while also making you more aware of the gap between dream and reality. But even this awareness can be useful, clarifying what matters to you, what you might want to work toward, what deserves your attention and effort when you're awake. Understanding that your brain naturally generates these positive scenarios, that it's not just processing problems, but also exploring possibilities and satisfying needs, can help you appreciate the full range of what dreaming does for you. You're not just working through difficulties every night, you're also experiencing joy, pleasure, success, connection, all the positive aspects of human experience that your brain values and wants to simulate, rehearse, and strengthen. Sometimes those dreams feel transparently meaningful, connected to obvious desires and goals. Other times they speak in a language that feels symbolic, metaphorical, less literally connected to anything you can name in your waking life. You dream of a house, not your actual house, but one that feels deeply familiar, with rooms that expand impossibly, doors that lead to unexpected places, architecture that shifts when you're not looking. Or you dream of water, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, sometimes you're drowning, sometimes you're swimming easily through crystal clarity. Or you dream of losing your teeth, that common dream that almost everyone has at some point, where your teeth crumble or fall out and you wake with your tongue checking to make sure they're still there. These are symbolic dreams, experiences that feel like they mean something beyond their literal content, and they've fascinated human beings for as long as we've been recording our dreams. The question of whether dreams actually have symbolic meaning, whether they're trying to tell you something in coded language, is one that science approaches carefully. Modern neuroscience doesn't find evidence for universal dream symbols that mean the same thing for everyone, the way ancient dream interpretation texts might suggest. There's no consistent proof that dreaming of water always means emotion, or that houses always represent the self, or that falling always indicates loss of control. But there is evidence that dreams use metaphorical thinking, that they represent abstract concepts through concrete imagery, and that the specific symbols your brain chooses are personally meaningful, even if they're not universally interpretable. Think about how your brain works when you're awake and trying to explain something abstract. You naturally reach for metaphors and analogies. You describe time as a river, emotions as weather, relationships as journeys, challenges as mountains to climb. This metaphorical thinking is fundamental to human cognition. It's how we make sense of intangible concepts by mapping them onto physical, sensory experiences we can imagine and understand. Your dreaming brain does the same thing, only more so, because it's working with reduced logical constraint and heightened emotional and visual processing. It takes your concerns, your feelings, your psychological states, and it represents them through imagery and scenarios that capture something essential about those internal experiences. Houses in dreams are one of the most commonly reported symbols, and they do seem to often relate to the self, to identity, to your sense of security and structure, but the meaning is personal and contextual. If you grew up in a house that felt unsafe, houses in your dreams might carry different emotional weight than if you grew up somewhere secure and loving. If you're currently dealing with housing instability or searching for a home, houses in dreams might be quite literal rather than symbolic. The question isn't what does a house mean in some universal sense, but what does this particular house in this particular dream mean to you given everything that's happening in your life right now? Water appears frequently in dreams across cultures. and it often seems to relate to emotion, to the unconscious, to things that are fluid and deep and potentially overwhelming. But again, this isn't a fixed code. For someone who loves swimming, who finds water calming and joyful, water dreams might mean something very different than for someone with a fear of drowning or a traumatic experience with water. The symbol gains its meaning from your personal associations, your emotional history, the context of the dream, and of your waking life. Your brain is using imagery that resonates with your specific experience, not pulling from some universal dictionary. The common dream of losing teeth is fascinating because it's so widespread. Surveys suggest that somewhere between 39 and 45% of people have had this dream at least once. Various theories exist about what it might represent. Some researchers point to anxiety about appearance or aging, since teeth are visible markers of health and attractiveness. Others suggest it relates to feelings of powerlessness or loss of control, since losing teeth would fundamentally change your ability to eat and speak. Still others note that teeth dreams often occur during periods of significant life transition, times when you're metaphorically losing one version of yourself and developing another. The dream might not mean any one specific thing. It might be your brain's way of representing the experience of loss, change, vulnerability, or transformation in a visceral, physical way that captures the emotional intensity of whatever you're going through. Symbolic dreams often involve transformations, impossible combinations, surreal juxtapositions that wouldn't make literal sense. You might dream of a person who looks like your mother, but somehow is also your boss, or you're in your childhood bedroom, but it's also your workplace. Or you're doing something you haven't done in years, but in a context that belongs to the present. These weird blendings aren't just random glitches, they're your brain making connections, linking different memories and concepts that share emotional themes or underlying patterns. The person who's both your mother and your boss might represent authority or care or judgment, or some other quality they share in your emotional experience of them. The bedroom-workplace hybrid might represent how work has invaded your sense of rest or safety. The juxtaposition is the meaning. What makes interpretation tricky is that symbols are idiosyncratic and context-dependent. The snake that represents danger to one person might represent healing to someone else, wisdom to a third person, sexuality to a fourth. The meaning comes from your associations, your experiences, your cultural background, your current concerns. This is why dream dictionaries that claim to tell you what any symbol means are fundamentally misguided. They're trying to impose universal meanings onto deeply personal imagery. Your dreaming brain is speaking your language, using your vocabulary of images and associations, and only you have the full context needed to understand what it might be expressing. From a neuroscience perspective, symbolic dreams emerge from how your brain processes and integrates information during REM sleep. Your hippocampus and cortex are in active conversation, replaying and consolidating memories, but they're not doing this in neat, organized ways. Memories get activated by association. One memory triggers another that shares some feature which triggers another, and so on. Emotional content links to other emotional content. Visual patterns connect to other visual patterns. Concepts that share underlying structure get networked together. The result is a kind of creative mixing, where elements from different experiences combine in novel ways that might reveal hidden connections or patterns you hadn't consciously noticed. This associative, metaphorical processing might actually serve important cognitive functions. By linking different experiences that share emotional or structural similarities, your brain might be building more abstract, generalizable knowledge. You're not just storing individual memories, you're extracting patterns, developing intuitions, creating mental models that help you navigate similar situations in the future. The symbolic dream about being unprepared for a test, even when you're decades past school, might be your brain's way of working with the general pattern of unpreparedness, of anxiety about being evaluated, of fear of failure. The specific imagery is just a vehicle for processing the underlying psychological theme. There's also evidence that emotional intensity influences how symbolic dreams become. The stronger the emotion attached to a concern or experience, the more likely your brain is to represent it in metaphorical, disguised, or transformed ways rather than literally. This might be a form of emotional regulation. By representing something through symbol rather than direct replay, your brain can work with the emotional content at a slightly safer distance. You can process the fear of loss through a dream about losing an object rather than dreaming directly about losing a person. You can work through feelings about your body through dreams about houses or vehicles rather than confronting body image issues directly. The question of whether you should try to interpret your symbolic dreams is interesting. Some people find it valuable to reflect on their dreams, to explore what the imagery might represent, to use dreams as a window into their emotional lives and concerns. Others find dream interpretation frustrating or unhelpful, preferring to let dreams do their work without conscious analysis. From a neuroscience perspective, the therapeutic benefit of dreams doesn't seem to depend on interpretation. Your brain accomplishes its consolidation and emotional processing, whether you analyze the dreams afterward or not. But reflection can provide insights, can help you notice patterns in your emotional life, can serve as a form of self-exploration if that's something you value. What's clear is that symbolic dreams are doing something, even if we can't always articulate exactly what. They're not just random noise. They're your brain working with abstract concepts through concrete imagery, making connections across different experiences, processing emotional themes that matter to you. The symbols are personal, the meanings are contextual, and the interpretation is optional. Your dreaming mind will do its work regardless. But sometimes these symbolic dreams feel significant, like they're carrying important information, like they're trying to show you something about yourself or your life. And sometimes they're just beautifully strange, impossibly creative remixings of memory and imagination that defy interpretation entirely. You're at a party with people who died centuries ago, but they're using smartphones and nobody finds this odd. Or you're trying to get somewhere urgently important, but you're moving through thick air while wearing a backpack full of live fish, and this seems completely reasonable. Or your grandmother is explaining quantum physics while baking bread in a spaceship that's also somehow your elementary school cafeteria. These are nonsense dreams, the utterly bizarre, logically impossible, wildly creative combinations that make no sense whatsoever when you wake up and try to describe them. And they might be the purest expression of what your sleeping brain is actually doing, making connections without constraints, remixing reality without rules. Not every dream needs to mean something. Not every dream is processing trauma or rehearsing threats or consolidating memories or working through emotions. Some dreams are simply what happens when a brain that's designed to make sense of things keeps running while most of its reality-checking systems are offline. You have billions of neurons firing, millions of memories stored, countless associations between concepts and images and feelings, and during REM sleep, all of this is active while your prefrontal cortex, the part that says, wait, that's impossible, or this doesn't make sense, is mostly quiet. The result is beautiful, bizarre chaos. Think of your waking consciousness as having a strict editor, someone who's constantly checking whether things are logical, possible, consistent with reality. This editor doesn't let random thoughts become your experienced reality. It filters, organizes, constrains, but during REM sleep, the editor goes on break. Your brain keeps generating content images, scenarios, narratives, but there's no one stopping the impossible combinations, the category violations, the physical impossibilities from being experienced as real. The dead can be alive, objects can be other objects simultaneously. Space and time can work however they want. Your brain proposes these things and nothing says no, so you experience them as though they're perfectly normal. The randomness isn't complete though. Even in the most nonsensical dreams, there are patterns if you look closely. The elements usually come from your own experience. People you know or have seen, places you've been or images you've encountered, concepts you think about. What's random is how they're combined. Your brain is essentially shuffling its database, pulling items from different categories and time periods and contexts, and mashing them together in novel ways. Your deceased grandmother might appear because memories of her got activated. The smartphone might appear because you use one constantly. The quantum physics might come from something you read. The dream isn't pulling these elements from nowhere, it's just combining them without regard for whether the combination makes any logical sense. This recombination might actually serve a purpose, even when it seems like pure nonsense. Creativity often comes from unexpected combinations, from linking things that don't normally go together. By allowing your brain to make wild, unconstrained associations during sleep, you might be fostering the kind of flexible thinking that leads to insights, innovations, solutions to problems that eluded your logical waking mind. There's a reason why people sometimes report waking up with creative ideas or solutions after sleeping. Their dreaming brain has been exploring possibility space without the usual constraints, making connections that waking logic would never permit. Scientists studying dream content have found that bizarreness actually increases across the night. Your early dreams, occurring in shorter REM periods closer to sleep onset, tend to be more realistic and coherent. As the night progresses and your REM periods get longer and deeper, the dreams become progressively stranger, more impossible, more willing to violate the rules of reality. This might reflect your brain moving further from waking patterns of organization, settling deeper into its own internal logic or lack thereof. By morning, by those long final REM periods, your dreams can be utterly surreal, completely untethered from physical possibility. The bizarreness also seems to correlate with reduced activity in specific brain regions. Your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which handles working memory and logical reasoning, shows markedly reduced activity during REM sleep. Your ventromedial prefrontal cortex, involved in decision-making and reality monitoring, is also quieter than during waking. Meanwhile, your posterior cortical regions, visual, spatial, and associative areas are highly active, generating imagery and making connections. So you have high creative and associative processing with low logical oversight, which is pretty much the perfect recipe for generating content that's imaginative, vivid, and completely nonsensical. Some of the most common forms of dream bizarreness involve category violations, things being simultaneously in two incompatible categories. A person who's both dead and alive. A place that's both indoors and outdoors. An object that's both small enough to hold and large enough to live in. These violations happen because your brain normally stores information in overlapping networks, and during dreaming, activation can spread across networks in ways that wake-brain logic wouldn't allow. The memory networks for your grandmother and for your colleague might have some overlapping features. Perhaps they're both authority figures, or both warm presences, and during a dream, this overlap can cause them to merge into a single, impossible entity. Time violations are also incredibly common. You might be your current age, but in your childhood home, with people from different eras of your life all present at once. Past, present, and sometimes imagined future can coexist in the same dream scene. This happens because your memory system doesn't store temporal information the same way it stores other details. Memories are organized more by emotional significance, by associations, by context, than by strict chronology. During dreaming, when these memories get activated and combined, the temporal information gets scrambled or ignored entirely. Your brain doesn't care when something happened. It cares about the patterns, the emotions, the associations. Physical impossibilities show up constantly. You're flying, but also walking. You're underwater, but breathing normally. Gravity works wrong. Distances expand and contract without reason. Your body does things bodies can't do. These violations occur partly because during REM sleep, your sensory and motor systems are partially active but disconnected from actual sensory input and actual movement. Your brain is generating the experience of movement, of sensation, of physical interaction, but without the usual feedback that would constrain those experiences to match physical reality. The result is physics that follows dream logic rather than actual physics. There's something liberating about nonsense dreams when you think about them in the morning. They're proof that your brain doesn't need reality to be interesting, that it can entertain itself with impossible scenarios, that imagination doesn't require plausibility. These dreams remind you that consciousness is fundamentally creative, generative, capable of producing experiences that have never existed and could never exist. You spend so much of your waking life constrained by what's real, what's possible, what makes sense. In nonsense dreams, those constraints dissolve, and your mind gets to play in impossible spaces. From an evolutionary perspective, it's not clear that nonsense dreams serve any specific function. They might simply be a side effect of the brain's consolidation and processing systems running without full logical oversight. Or they might serve the creativity enhancement function mentioned earlier. Or they might be completely functionless, just noise generated by an active sleeping brain, and that's okay. Not everything about human biology has to serve a purpose. Some things just are, byproducts of systems that evolved for other reasons, interesting quirks that don't necessarily help or harm survival. What's interesting is that people rarely feel disturbed by nonsense dreams the way they do by nightmares, even when the content is objectively very strange. You can dream about your kitchen appliances, having a conversation about philosophy while you're late for an appointment at a school that's also a forest, and you wake up amused or bemused but not distressed. The bizarreness itself doesn't trigger fear or anxiety. It's only when dreams combine impossibility with threatening content that they become nightmares. Bizarreness plus fear equals nightmare. Bizarreness plus neutrality or positive emotion equals just a weird dream you might laugh about over breakfast. Understanding that nonsense dreams are normal, expected, and possibly even beneficial can help you worry less if you remember particularly strange dreams. You're not losing touch with reality. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. You're just experiencing what happens when one of the most complex information processing systems in the known universe keeps running while its quality control department is temporarily offline. The result is creative, impossible, often hilarious, sometimes profound, and always uniquely yours. But among all the varied dream types you experience, some stand out for a different reason, not their content, but their persistence, the way they return again and again across months or years. For years, you've had the same dream or variations of it. Maybe you're back in school, discovering you have a test you didn't know about and haven't studied for. Maybe you're trying to get somewhere important, but obstacles keep appearing, your car won't work, the roads keep changing. You're moving in slow motion. Maybe you're in your childhood home, or you're searching for something you can never find, or you're unprepared for a performance you're supposed to give. The details might shift, but the core scenario repeats, appearing months or years apart, sometimes fading for long periods before returning unexpectedly. These are recurring dreams, and they're far more common than you might think. Roughly 60 to 75% of adults report having had at least one recurring dream at some point in their lives. What makes a dream recur? Why does your brain return to the same scenario, the same emotional territory, the same symbolic landscape again and again when it has infinite possibilities to choose from? The answer seems to involve unresolved psychological material patterns in your emotional life that your brain recognizes as important, as unfinished, as requiring ongoing attention and processing. A recurring dream is often a sign that some theme in your waking life remains active, that your sleeping mind keeps returning to it because the underlying concern or conflict hasn't been fully resolved or integrated. The school test dream is one of the most commonly reported recurring dreams, persisting even decades after people finish formal education. What's fascinating is that this dream typically isn't about actual school or actual tests. It's about evaluation anxiety, about feeling unprepared, about fear of being judged and found lacking. These are concerns that don't end when you leave school. They translate into workplace performance reviews, into professional presentations, into any situation where you feel your competence is being assessed. Your brain has latched onto the test scenario as a template, a symbolic framework for processing this category of anxiety, and it returns to this framework whenever evaluation concerns are active in your waking life. Another extremely common recurring dream involves trying to reach a destination, but being unable to get there. Your car breaks down, or you can't find your keys, or you're running but moving impossibly slowly, or the path keeps changing. This theme often relates to feelings of being blocked, frustrated, unable to achieve your goals, or reach what you're striving for. The specific obstacles in the dream might change, but the underlying emotional experience, the frustration of effort without progress, of being thwarted in your attempts to get where you need to go, remains constant. Your brain is working with this pattern of experience, processing it repeatedly, because the waking life situation it represents continues to be relevant. Recurring dreams often begin during periods of stress or transition and can persist for years or even decades. They might start when you're going through a divorce, or starting a new job, or dealing with a health crisis, or experiencing any major life change. The dream captures something essential about that experience: the anxiety, the uncertainty, the challenge, and even after the immediate situation resolves, if the underlying psychological theme remains active in your life, the dream can continue. You might have finished that divorce years ago, but if trust and vulnerability in relationships remain difficult areas for you, relationship-themed recurring dreams might persist. From a neuroscience perspective, recurring dreams likely involve the repeated activation of specific neural networks during sleep. Your brain has certain patterns of association, certain emotional themes that are strongly represented in your neural architecture because they've been important throughout your life. When you sleep, When your memory, consolidation, and emotional processing systems are active, these strongly weighted networks are more likely to activate than other patterns. It's like your brain has worn grooves in certain pathways, and during dreaming, neural activity naturally flows into these established channels. The dream recurs because the underlying neural pattern keeps recurring. Interestingly, recurring dreams can evolve over time. The basic scenario might stay the same, but details change, or your response within the dream changes, or the dream's resolution shifts. Some researchers believe this evolution reflects actual psychological change, your brain working through the underlying issue and gradually moving toward resolution. For instance, someone who has recurring dreams about being chased might initially always be caught or always be running without resolution. But over time, as they develop better coping skills in waking life, the dream might change, they might find a hiding place, or turn to confront the pursuer, or discover the pursuer isn't as threatening as they thought. The dream tracks psychological development. There are also recurring dreams that are positive or neutral rather than anxiety-driven. Some people have recurring dreams of beautiful places they visit repeatedly, or pleasant interactions with specific dream characters, or experiences of flying or exploring. These might represent sources of comfort, escapism, or wish fulfillment that your brain returns to reliably. They're not indicating unresolved problems, but rather stable sources of positive feeling, mental landscapes that your sleeping mind finds rewarding to revisit. These positive recurring dreams are less commonly reported in research, possibly because people are less motivated to talk about or remember pleasant, non-problematic dreams. Childhood recurring dreams are particularly common and particularly persistent. Many people report having certain recurring dreams or nightmares throughout childhood that eventually stopped, usually sometime in adolescence or young adulthood. These often involve being chased, being lost, or encountering threatening figures. Developmental psychologists suggest these reflect the common anxieties of childhood: fear of separation from caregivers, fear of danger, fear of the unknown. As you develop more mature coping mechanisms and your sense of safety and autonomy strengthens, these dreams typically fade. But for some people, childhood recurring dreams can persist into adulthood or resurface during times of stress. There's also a subset of recurring dreams that seem to be processing specific traumatic memories. These are different from ordinary recurring dreams in that they often include more literal content from the actual traumatic event. They're typically accompanied by more intense fear and distress, and they can be symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Trauma-related recurring dreams can be particularly resistant to change and might require specific therapeutic intervention. The recurring nature in these cases suggests that the brain's normal processing mechanisms are struggling with the material, getting stuck in a loop rather than successfully integrating and resolving the traumatic memory. Some therapeutic approaches specifically target recurring dreams. Imagery rehearsal therapy, which we mentioned briefly in the nightmare chapter, involves consciously reimagining your recurring dream while awake and creating a different outcome or resolution. You rehearse this new version before sleep, essentially giving your brain an alternative template to work with. For many people, this practice can reduce the frequency of recurring dreams or change their content. It's as though you're collaborating with your sleeping mind, offering it a different pathway through the material it keeps working on. Lucid dreaming can also affect recurring dreams. If you become lucid during a recurring dream, if you recognize, oh, this is that dream again, you might be able to consciously alter what happens next. Some people have used lucidity to confront threatening figures in recurring dreams, to change frightening scenarios into neutral or positive ones, or to explore the dream environment more intentionally. This conscious intervention sometimes reduces or eliminates the recurrence, suggesting that the dream was waiting for some kind of active engagement or resolution that lucidity allowed you to provide. The question of whether you should try to solve or eliminate recurring dreams is complex. On one hand, if a recurring dream is distressing or disruptive to your sleep quality, addressing it therapeutically might be valuable. On the other hand, recurring dreams might be doing important ongoing work, processing themes that genuinely need ongoing attention because they're active parts of your psychological life. Eliminating the dream doesn't eliminate the underlying concern. It just removes one avenue through which your brain is trying to work with that concern. Sometimes the better approach is to reflect on what the recurring dream might be telling you about your waking life, what patterns or concerns it might be highlighting that deserve conscious attention. What's clear is that recurring dreams are meaningful in a way that one-time dreams aren't, not because they're prophetic or mystical, but because repetition itself indicates significance. Your brain doesn't randomly allocate processing resources. If it's returning to the same scenario repeatedly across months or years, that tells you something about what themes are important in your psychological architecture, what concerns or conflicts or patterns deserve attention. The specific interpretation of any recurring dream is personal, but the fact of recurrence is information in itself. And as your dreams cycle through their various forms, replaying recent events, processing emotions, rehearsing threats, fulfilling wishes, speaking in symbols, creating beautiful nonsense, returning to familiar patterns, they're also changing across the arc of your entire life. The dreams you have tonight, at whatever age you are now, are different from the dreams you had as a child, and they'll be different again from the dreams you'll have decades from now. Dreaming changes across the lifespan, evolving as your brain develops, matures, and ages, reflecting not just what's happening in your life, but fundamental shifts in your neural architecture, your emotional regulation, your relationship with memory and imagination. Understanding this evolution can help you make sense of your current dreams and recognize that what you experience in sleep is appropriate to your stage of life. Children dream differently than adults, though for a long time researchers weren't sure exactly how differently, since young children have trouble reporting their dreams. What we know now from careful studies that wake children during REM sleep and ask simple questions is that very young children preschool age have relatively simple, static dreams. They're more like still images or brief scenes than narratives. A child might dream about an animal or about playing, but without the complex plots and emotional intensity that characterize adult dreams. Their dreams are also less self-focused. They're more likely to dream about animals or other children than about themselves as central characters. As children develop through early elementary school years, their dreams become more narrative, more complex, more self-involved. This mirrors the development of their waking cognitive abilities, their growing capacity for sustained narrative thinking, their developing sense of self as a continuous entity across time, their increasing ability to imagine different scenarios and perspectives. By around age 7 or 8, children's dreams start to resemble adult dreams in structure, though the content remains age-appropriate. They're having adventures, experiencing conflicts, dealing with school and friends and family dynamics through the metaphorical, emotional language of dream. Nightmares peak in childhood, particularly between ages 3 and 6. During this period, many children have frequent bad dreams or night terrors that can be deeply distressing for both the child and their parents. This timing corresponds with developmental stages where children are learning about danger, developing fears, building mental models of threats, but without yet having the cognitive sophistication to put those fears in realistic perspective. Their imaginations are vivid and powerful, but their logic and reality testing are still developing. The result is a particularly fertile ground for frightening dreams. Most children outgrow this phase naturally, as their cognitive and emotional regulation systems mature. Adolescence brings another significant shift in dreaming. Teen dreams become more intense, more emotional, more bizarre, and more negative in tone compared to childhood dreams. Nightmares might increase again during this period. This intensification corresponds with the massive brain changes happening during adolescence, pruning of unused neural connections, strengthening of important pathways, development of adult emotional regulation systems, hormonal changes affecting mood and arousal. Teenagers are also dealing with increased social complexity, identity formation, independence struggles, romantic feelings, and all the emotional turbulence that characterizes this developmental stage. Their dreams reflect this turbulence, becoming more dramatically emotional and more focused on social scenarios and personal identity. The content of adolescent dreams also shifts to include more peer interactions, more romantic or sexual content, more conflict with authority figures, more scenarios involving social acceptance and rejection. This makes sense given that adolescence is fundamentally about negotiating new kinds of relationships, establishing independence while maintaining connection, figuring out who you are separate from your family of origin. Dreams provide a space to work through these challenges, to rehearse social scenarios, to explore identity possibilities without real-world consequences. The intensity of teenage dreams might be uncomfortable, but it reflects important psychological work. Young adulthood and middle adulthood, roughly from the 20s through the 50s, represent a relative plateau in dream characteristics. Dreams during this long period are typically the most narrative, the most bizarre, the most emotionally complex. Adults have fully developed brains with sophisticated emotional regulation, extensive life experience to draw on, complex social networks, and often substantial responsibilities and stresses. Their dreams reflect this complexity, featuring multiple characters, shifting scenarios, layered emotional content, symbolic representations of concerns about work, relationships, health, finances, children, aging parents, and all the intricate responsibilities of adult life. Research on dream content across adulthood has found some consistent patterns. Men and women dream about different things, though the differences are less stark than stereotypes might suggest. Women's dreams tend to include more indoor settings, more known characters, more conversation and emotional interaction. Men's dreams tend to include more outdoor settings, more strangers, more physical aggression, but both men and women dream about achievement, failure, relationships, conflicts, and daily concerns. The gender differences in dreams likely reflect both socialization, different life experiences and concerns, and possibly some biological factors in how male and female brains process emotional and social information. As people move into older adulthood, the 60s and beyond dreams begin to change again. They tend to become somewhat less bizarre, less visually vivid, shorter, and more focused on the past. Older adults dream more about people from their earlier lives, more about memories and places from decades ago, less about impossible scenarios or strange transformations. This shift might reflect changes in brain function, some decline in the intensity of REM sleep, changes in how memory networks activate, reduced production of neurotransmitters involved in generating vivid imagery. But it also reflects the natural focus of older adulthood on life review, on making sense of one's history, on integrating a lifetime of experiences. Interestingly, emotional content in dreams seems to become more positive with age, contradicting the stereotype that older people are more negative. Studies have found that older adults report more positive emotions in their dreams than younger adults, fewer nightmares, less aggression, more friendly interactions. This might relate to what researchers call the positivity effect. In aging, older adults tend to focus more on positive information and regulate negative emotions more effectively than younger people. Their dreams reflect this shift in emotional orientation, becoming gentler, more nostalgic, less focused on threat and challenge. There are also changes in dream recall across the lifespan. Young adults typically remember dreams most frequently, possibly because they have the most intense and lengthy REM periods. Dream recall tends to decline gradually with age, though whether this reflects actual changes in dreaming or just changes in memory and attention is debated. Older adults might dream just as much, but remember fewer dreams, or they might actually have somewhat less vivid dreams that are less memorable. Sleep itself becomes lighter and more fragmented with age, which could reduce the intensity of dream experiences or make them harder to consolidate into memories. Health conditions that emerge more commonly in later life can also affect dreaming. People with Parkinson's disease, for instance, sometimes lose the normal REM atonia, the paralysis that prevents acting out dreams, and develop REM behavior disorder, where they physically enact their dreams, sometimes violently. Certain medications common in older adults can affect dream content and recall. Sleep apnea, which increases with age, disrupts sleep architecture, and can reduce REM sleep, potentially affecting both the quantity and quality of dreams. The relationship between physical health and dreaming becomes more apparent as the body ages. What remains constant across the entire lifespan is that people dream, that dreaming serves important functions for memory, emotion, and psychological well-being, and that dream content reflects the concerns and experiences of the dreamer's current life stage. A child's dreams of monsters serve similar functions, processing fear, rehearsing responses to threat as an adult's dreams of work, stress, or an elder's dreams of loss and memory. The specific content changes, but the underlying work continues from birth until the end of life. There's something reassuring about understanding these changes. Your dreams aren't random or meaningless. They're appropriate to who you are right now, to your stage of development, to your current concerns and capacities. If you're in midlife and your dreams feel chaotic and stressful, that's normal for the complexity of your current life. If you're older and your dreams feel gentler and more focused on the past, that's normal too. Your dreaming brain is always working with the material and capacities available to it at your current age, doing the best it can to process, consolidate, regulate, and prepare you for whatever comes next. And regardless of how dreams change across a lifetime, the deeper question remains, why do we dream at all? Behind all these dream types, the vivid narratives and quiet thoughts, the nightmares and wish fulfillment, the symbols and nonsense, the patterns that repeat and the memories that replay, lies a deeper question that humans have been asking for as long as we've been conscious enough to wonder about our own minds. Why do we dream at all? What is this strange nightly theater actually for? Scientists have proposed multiple theories over the decades, and the truth seems to be that dreaming serves not just one purpose but many, that these hours of internally generated experience accomplish several crucial functions simultaneously, functions so important that virtually every mammal does something similar. One of the most well-supported theories is memory consolidation, the idea that dreams help transfer information from temporary storage in your hippocampus to long-term storage in your cortex, strengthening important memories while allowing less important ones to fade. We've touched on this throughout previous chapters, but it's worth emphasizing how fundamental this function appears to be. Studies have shown repeatedly that people who sleep after learning perform better on memory tests than people who stay awake for an equivalent time period. The sleeping brain is actively processing, reorganizing, integrating new information with existing knowledge structures. Dreams might be the subjective experience of this processing, the conscious tip of a vast, unconscious iceberg of neural reorganization. But memory consolidation doesn't explain everything about dreams. It doesn't fully account for their emotional intensity, their bizarre imagery, their narrative quality. This is where emotional regulation theory comes in, the idea that REM sleep and dreaming help you process emotional experiences, reducing the intensity of negative emotions and maintaining psychological equilibrium. Remember that during REM sleep, your amygdala is active, but the stress neurochemical norepinephrine is at its lowest levels. You're reactivating emotional memories in a neurochemical context that's fundamentally safe, allowing you to work through difficult feelings without the full physiological stress response. This overnight therapy happens automatically, every night, helping you wake up emotionally recalibrated and better able to face new challenges. Matthew Walker, a prominent sleep researcher, has described REM sleep as overnight therapy, and the evidence supports this characterization. People who get adequate REM sleep show better emotional regulation, more accurate recognition of others' emotions, greater resilience in the face of stress. Those who are deprived of REM sleep become emotionally reactive, perceiving threats where none exist, struggling to manage their responses to minor frustrations. The dreaming that occurs during REM sleep seems to be essential for maintaining emotional health, for preventing the accumulation of unprocessed feelings that might otherwise lead to anxiety, depression, or emotional volatility. Then there's threat simulation theory, proposed by Finnish researcher Antti Revonsuo. This theory suggests that one function of dreaming, particularly the dreams involving danger and challenge, is to rehearse responses to threats in a safe environment. Throughout human evolution, being able to quickly and effectively respond to dangers, predators, environmental hazards, social conflicts was crucial for survival. Dreams might be your brain's way of keeping these response systems sharp, of practicing what to do when threatened, even during periods when you're not facing actual threats. The fact that nightmares and anxiety dreams are so common, that threatening content appears more frequently than pleasant content across cultures, supports this idea. Threat simulation theory doesn't mean that every dream is literally preparing you for specific dangers you'll face. Rather, it suggests that dreaming maintains and strengthens the neural circuits involved in threat detection and response, keeping them ready for when they're needed. You might never actually need to run from a monster or fight off an attacker, but the emotional and cognitive skills you practice in those dreams, rapid assessment of danger, decision-making under pressure, emotional regulation during fear, translate to real-world challenges, even when those challenges look completely different from dream scenarios. There's also the activation synthesis hypothesis, one of the older theories but still relevant. This proposes that dreams are essentially your cortex's attempt to make sense of random neural activation that occurs during REM sleep. Your brainstem generates signals that activate various parts of your cortex, visual regions, emotional regions, memory regions, somewhat randomly, and your cortex, which is fundamentally a pattern-making machine, tries to synthesize these random activations into something coherent. This would explain why dreams are often bizarre and illogical. You're creating narratives from essentially random neural noise. The theory has evolved over the years, and most researchers now think that the activation isn't entirely random, but rather reflects meaningful patterns of memory, consolidation, and emotional processing. Still, the basic insight remains valuable. Dreams involve your conscious mind trying to make sense of neural activity that wasn't designed to be coherent narrative. More recently, some researchers have proposed that dreaming serves a kind of cognitive flexibility function, helping your brain make novel connections between disparate pieces of information. By allowing your mind to wander through unusual associations, by combining memories and concepts in ways that waking logic wouldn't permit, dreams might foster creativity, insight, and problem solving. There are countless anecdotes of scientific discoveries, artistic creations, and solutions to difficult problems emerging from dreams. The chemist Auguste Kekulé reportedly dreamed of a snake biting its own tail, which led him to discover the ring structure of benzene. Paul McCartney claims the melody for Yesterday came to him in a dream. Whether or not these specific stories are accurate, they point to something real about how the unconstrained associative thinking of dreams can generate insights that evade more logical waking thought. Another interesting theory focuses on the simulation and rehearsal of social scenarios. Humans are intensely social creatures, and navigating social relationships requires sophisticated cognitive skills, understanding others' mental states, predicting their reactions, managing conflicts, building alliances, communicating effectively. Dreams are populated with other people, filled with conversations and social interactions and relationship dynamics. Some researchers suggest that this social content serves a rehearsal function, letting you practice social cognition, explore relationship possibilities, work through interpersonal tensions. You're essentially running social simulations, and like any simulation, they help you develop skills and strategies you can apply in real interactions. There's also evidence that dreaming plays a role in unlearning, actively forgetting information that's no longer relevant or that's cluttering your mental workspace. Your brain can't keep everything. If you didn't forget the vast majority of your daily experiences, your memory systems would quickly become overwhelmed with trivial details. REM sleep and dreaming might help your brain identify what's important enough to consolidate into long-term memory and what can safely be discarded. This process of active forgetting is just as important as remembering, allowing you to maintain a clean, organized mental library rather than an endless archive of everything you've ever experienced. The truth is, probably, that all of these theories capture part of what dreaming does. Memory consolidation, emotional regulation, threat simulation, pattern recognition, social rehearsal, creative insight, active forgetting. These aren't mutually exclusive functions. Your brain is capable of doing multiple things simultaneously, and something as complex as dreaming, which involves coordinated activity across many brain regions over several hours each night, almost certainly serves multiple purposes. Different types of dreams might emphasize different functions. Replay dreams focus on memory consolidation, Emotional processing dreams prioritize regulation of feelings. Nightmares might be more about threat rehearsal. Nonsense dreams might be largely creative byproducts that happen to foster useful cognitive flexibility. What's absolutely clear is that dreaming is important. When animals or humans are deprived specifically of REM sleep, with the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs, they suffer significant cognitive and emotional impairments. They show reduced ability to learn new tasks, particularly complex or emotional tasks. They become emotionally dysregulated, anxious, sometimes even psychotic if the deprivation is severe and prolonged. Their immune systems weaken. When finally allowed to sleep normally, they show REM rebound, dramatically increased amounts of REM sleep, as though their brain is desperately trying to catch up on the dreaming it missed. This tells us that whatever dreaming does, the brain needs it badly enough to prioritize making up for lost dream time. The evolutionary perspective supports this too. REM sleep and its associated dreaming appear in all mammals and possibly some birds. This suggests that the basic function of dreaming evolved at least 100 million years ago, long before humans existed. It's been maintained across vast stretches of evolutionary time, across thousands of species, which means it must confer significant survival advantages. Animals that didn't dream, that didn't process memories and emotions during sleep, that didn't rehearse responses to threats in the safety of their sleeping minds, apparently survived and reproduced less successfully than those that did. Dreaming stuck around because it works, because it helps organisms navigate their worlds more effectively. Understanding why you dream doesn't diminish the mystery or wonder of the experience. Knowing that your nightmare about being chased serves threat rehearsal functions doesn't make it less vivid or emotionally impactful. Knowing that your bizarre dream about impossible combinations reflects memory, consolidation doesn't make it less creative or strange. If anything, understanding the purposes behind dreaming makes it more remarkable. These nightly experiences aren't just random firing or meaningless entertainment. They're your brain doing some of its most important work that's so crucial it's been woven into the fundamental architecture of sleep itself. Tonight, all of this ancient machinery will activate again in your sleeping mind. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, all of this will unfold in your mind. You won't be aware of most of it. You won't remember the majority of dreams you have, but the work will happen nonetheless, invisible and essential, as automatic and necessary as breathing. Let's walk through what will actually occur during a single night of sleep, how all these dream types will weave together in the darkness, how your brain will move through its ancient cycles, doing work that's been refined over millions of years of evolution. You'll begin at the threshold. As your consciousness starts to fade, as you cross from waking into sleep, those hypnagogic visions might flicker brief images, fleeting sounds, strange sensations that last only seconds. Your brain is testing the transition, beginning to disconnect from external reality and turn inward. You might see geometric patterns, a face that appears and vanishes, hear a voice calling your name. You might feel that sudden falling sensation and jerk awake, your body confused about what's happening as your muscles relax. These threshold experiences are brief, often forgotten immediately, but they mark the beginning of your journey. Then you'll descend into stage 2 sleep, and a bit later into deep stage 3. For the first hour or 90 minutes of the night, you'll spend most of your time in these deeper stages, particularly in slow-wave sleep, where your brain produces those long, synchronized delta waves. Here, if you have any mental experiences at all, there'll be those quiet, thought-like, non-REM dreams, abstract, fragmented. more like contemplation than experience. You probably won't remember them, but beneath your conscious awareness, your hippocampus and cortex are having their conversation, transferring today's experiences into long-term storage, consolidating what you learned, strengthening the neural patterns that represent new skills and knowledge. After about 90 minutes, you'll enter your first REM period of the night. It will be brief, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, emerging right on schedule as your sleep cycle reaches its expected rhythm. Your eyes will begin moving rapidly beneath your closed lids. Your brain will light up with activity while your body remains deeply paralyzed. And you'll have your first real dream, probably something tied to today's events, a replay dream perhaps, or something that touches on recent concerns but without the elaborate narrative quality of later dreams. This first REM dream is often forgotten, too brief and too early to leave much impression, but it's beginning the night's work of emotional processing and memory integration. Then the cycle repeats. You'll descend back through the stages, spending more time in that restorative deep sleep. Your body is doing its repair work now, releasing growth hormone, strengthening your immune system, restoring tissues. Your brain continues its memory consolidation, particularly for procedural learning, for the physical skills and automatic sequences you're building. If you practice something new today, a sport, a musical instrument, a work task, this is when your brain is cementing that learning, when those neural pathways are being reinforced through sleep spindles, those brief bursts of synchronized activity that mark memory transfer. Your second REM period arrives after another roughly 90-minute cycle. It's a bit longer now, maybe 15 minutes, and the dreams are starting to become more elaborate. You might have an emotional processing dream here, working through something from your day or your week, representing concerns through symbolic scenarios rather than literal replay. Or you might have a wish fulfillment dream, experiencing something you desire, your brain exploring possibilities and satisfying needs. The emotional content is becoming more pronounced, your amygdala more active, but still within that safe neurochemical context where stress hormones remain low. As the night progresses through its third and fourth cycles, the balance shifts dramatically. You're spending less time in deep sleep now and much more time in REM. By your fourth cycle, you might be in REM sleep for 20 or 30 minutes, having extended, elaborate dreams with complex narratives, multiple scenes, vivid imagery, strong emotions. This is where the most memorable dreams occur, where nightmares are most likely if you're going to have them, where lucid dreams can emerge if that spark of awareness finds you. These long REM periods are when your brain is doing its most intensive emotional work, processing the feelings that need the most attention, running its simulations of social scenarios and potential threats. The content of these dreams will draw from everything recent experiences, distant memories, current concerns, enduring patterns in your psychological life. You might have a symbolic dream where your anxieties are represented through metaphor, your worries about work transformed into a dream about being unprepared for a test or unable to reach a destination. You might have a nonsense dream where impossible combinations of memories create surreal scenarios that make no sense but somehow feel meaningful in the moment. You might encounter a recurring dream, that familiar scenario returning to work on themes that remain unresolved in your waking life. If you're lucky, you might have a lucid dream in these late cycles. Something might be odd enough, impossible enough, that a corner of your prefrontal cortex activates and you realize you're dreaming. You might observe with fascination, or you might try to take control, to fly or explore or change what's happening. whether lucid or not, these dreams are doing their work, consolidating memories, regulating emotions, rehearsing responses, making connections, processing the endless complexity of being human and conscious and alive in the world. By your 5th or 6th cycle, if you're sleeping long enough, you might be spending 40 minutes or more in REM sleep, with only brief dips into lighter, non-REM stages. These final dreams of the night are often the longest, the most vivid, the most bizarre. They're also the ones you're most likely to remember, because you're sleeping more lightly now, closer to waking. And when you do wake, either naturally or to an alarm, you're emerging from this rich dream state with the content still fresh in your mind. You might carry pieces of these dreams with you into the morning, their emotions still coloring your mood, their strange logic still echoing in your thoughts. But here's what's remarkable. Even if you remember only fragments, even if you wake thinking you didn't dream at all, the work has been done. Your memories have been consolidated, your emotions have been processed, your threat response systems have been maintained, your social cognition has been rehearsed, your creativity has been nourished by unconstrained association. Your brain has spent these hours not resting from the work of consciousness, but engaging in a different kind of work, equally essential, that can only happen when you're disconnected from external demands and turned fully inward. This pattern, this architecture of cycling through stages, this progression from deep restoration to emotional processing, this journey through different types of dreams serving different functions has happened every night of your life since before you were born. Fetuses show REM sleep in the womb. Newborns spend more than half their sleep time in REM, their developing brains requiring enormous amounts of this dream-rich sleep. And this pattern will continue every night for the rest of your life, as fundamental to your survival and well-being as food or water. You need to dream the way you need to breathe. Understanding all of this, all these dream types, all these functions, all this invisible work happening in the darkness doesn't change what will happen tonight. Your brain doesn't need your conscious cooperation or understanding. It knows what to do. It's been doing this for your entire life, following patterns encoded in your neural architecture by millions of years of evolution. But perhaps understanding can help you trust the process, can help you let go more easily into sleep. We can help you worry less about bad dreams or strange dreams or forgotten dreams, knowing that all of it is normal, all of it is functional, all of it is your brain taking care of you. So as you settle into this moment, as your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts begin to drift, you can release yourself to the journey ahead. You don't need to remember your dreams for them to work. You don't need to interpret them or analyze them or make sense of them. You just need to sleep, to allow your consciousness to cycle through its stages, to let your dreaming mind do what it's designed to do. Every dream type we've explored, the threshold visions and quiet thoughts, the vivid narratives and lucid awareness, the replays and emotional processing, the nightmares and wish fulfillment, the symbols and nonsense, the patterns that return, all of these are waiting in the architecture of your sleep, ready to emerge right on schedule. Your brain is ready, your body is ready. The ancient machinery of sleep and dreaming is prepared to carry you through the night, doing its essential work while you rest. So let yourself drift now, let the transition begin, let the threshold open. Your dreams are waiting, and they have important work to do. Sleep well, dream well, and wake restored, your mind reorganized, your emotions regulated, your memories consolidated, your consciousness renewed by the gift of another night spent in the theater of your sleeping mind. We began this journey with a simple observation that right now, as you settle into rest, your mind is preparing for something extraordinary. Now, having explored every type of dream that will visit you in the darkness, having understood the architecture that shapes them and the purposes they serve, you can appreciate just how extraordinary that preparation truly is. Your brain isn't simply shutting down for the night. It's preparing to embark on one of the most complex, most essential processes in all of human biology. A journey through memory and emotion, through fear and desire, through the impossible and the symbolic, all in service of keeping you healthy, balanced, and whole. Every dream type we've explored tonight exists for a reason. The hypnagogic visions that flicker at the threshold aren't random glitches. They're your brain testing the transition between states, beginning to disconnect from external reality and turn its vast processing power inward. The quiet, abstract dreams of deep sleep aren't empty spaces. They're the subjective experience of your most crucial memory work, your hippocampus and cortex in conversation, transferring today's learning into tomorrow's knowledge. The vivid REM dreams that feel like complete alternate realities aren't meaningless theater, they're your brain at its most active, processing emotions with the intensity turned up but the stress chemicals turned down, allowing you to work through difficult feelings in a fundamentally safe context. The lucid dreams where you suddenly realize you're dreaming show you the remarkable flexibility of consciousness itself, the way your brain can be simultaneously asleep and aware, existing in a hybrid state that belongs fully to neither waking nor sleeping. The replay dreams that seem so mundane, so literal, are actually doing some of your most practical learning work, consolidating new skills, strengthening neural pathways, turning effortful actions into automatic capabilities. The emotional processing dreams that work through your feelings and relationships are providing you with overnight therapy, helping you wake up recalibrated, better able to face new challenges with appropriate rather than exaggerated responses. Even nightmares, as uncomfortable as they are, serve crucial functions, rehearsing your threat responses, keeping your survival circuits sharp, processing fears in ways that might actually help you cope with anxiety rather than being overwhelmed by it. The wish fulfillment dreams that give you experiences your waking life hasn't provided aren't just pleasant escapism, they're your brain exploring possibilities, rehearsing success, satisfying needs, building motivation and confidence through mental simulation. The symbolic dreams that speak in metaphor and imagery aren't mystical messages, they're your brain making connections, representing abstract concerns through concrete scenarios, building broader understanding by linking experiences that share underlying patterns. The nonsense dreams, those beautifully bizarre, impossible combinations, remind you that your brain doesn't need reality to be creative, that imagination freed from constraint can make connections that logic never would, that sometimes the most meaningless seeming dreams might foster the most useful cognitive flexibility. The recurring dreams that return again and again aren't signs that something's wrong with you. They're signs that certain themes remain important in your psychological architecture, that your brain recognizes unfinished work and keeps returning to it night after night until something shifts. And the way dreams change across your lifetime, from the simple images of childhood through the turbulent intensity of adolescence to the complex narratives of adulthood and the gentler memories of older age, shows you that dreaming is always appropriate to who you are right now, always working with the concerns and capacities available at your current stage of life. Understanding why you dream, that it serves memory, consolidation, and emotional regulation, threat simulation and creative insight, social rehearsal and active forgetting. Probably all of these functions simultaneously helps you appreciate the gift your sleeping mind gives you every single night. This isn't optional. This isn't luxury. This is as fundamental to your survival and well-being as food or water or air. You need to dream. Your brain needs these hours of internally generated experience to process, to consolidate, to regulate, to prepare you for the challenges of consciousness and existence. Animals that don't dream, that don't process memories and emotions during sleep, don't survive as well. Humans who are deprived of dreaming suffer dramatically in their cognitive function, their emotional stability, their physical health. And tonight, right now, as you move towards sleep, this entire system is preparing to activate in your mind. The 90-minute cycles will begin. The stages will progress in their expected rhythm. The dream types will emerge at their appointed times, threshold visions giving way to deep consolidation, brief early REM periods lengthening into elaborate late-night narratives, each type of dream doing its particular work at the particular moment when your brain is best prepared for that work. You won't control this. You won't direct it. You don't need to. The architecture is built into you, encoded in your brainstem and hypothalamus and cortex, refined by millions of years of evolution, as automatic and reliable as your heartbeat. Most of what happens tonight you won't remember. You'll wake tomorrow morning with fragments at best, maybe nothing at all. Maybe just a vague sense of having dreamed about something you can't quite recall. And that's perfect. That's exactly as it should be. The work doesn't require your conscious memory to be effective. Your memories have been consolidated. Whether you remember the dreams that did the consolidating, your emotions have been processed, whether you can recall the scenarios that processed them, your threat responses have been rehearsed, your social cognition has been practiced, your creativity has been nourished, all beneath the level of what you'll carry forward into waking awareness. The work is invisible, automatic, happening in depths of your mind you'll never consciously access. But now you know it's happening. Now you understand that when you sleep, you're not just resting, you're engaging in some of the most sophisticated information processing your brain is capable of. Now you can release yourself into sleep with trust, with appreciation, with the knowledge that your dreaming mind is competent and ancient and designed exactly for this work. You don't need to fear strange dreams or worry about nightmares or try to control or interpret what emerges in the darkness. You just need to sleep, to allow the process to unfold, to trust that your brain knows what it's doing because it's been doing this successfully every night of your life. So let yourself drift now. Let the transition begin. Feel your body growing heavy, your thoughts starting to wander, your grip on external reality beginning to loosen. The threshold is opening. The first stage is approaching. And beyond it, all those dream types are waiting the replays and the processing, the threats and the wishes, the symbols and the nonsense, the patterns that will return, and the experiences you've never had before. All of it is yours, all of it is normal, all of it is your brain taking exquisite care of you while you rest. If you found this exploration helpful, if understanding your dreams helps you approach sleep with more ease and less anxiety, consider sharing this with someone else who might benefit from this knowledge. Leave a comment about which dream type resonates most with you, or which one you experience most often, or what you learned tonight that surprised you. Your reflections help build this community of people who are learning to understand and appreciate the remarkable biology of sleep and dreaming. And here's something to consider as you drift. What if you approach sleep tonight not as an interruption of your real life, but as a continuation of it in a different mode? What if you honored these hours of dreaming as much as you honor your waking hours, recognizing that both states are essential, both are doing important work, both are fully part of what it means to be human and conscious and alive? Your waking self and your dreaming self aren't separate. They're two aspects of one continuous mind, one continuous you, taking turns at different kinds of necessary work. Tonight, every dream type explained, every mystery softened, every night a little less unknown. Sleep well, dream well, and wake restored, your memories consolidated, your emotions regulated, your mind reorganized by the invisible work of dreaming. Your brain is ready to begin. Let yourself fall into sleep and trust the ancient process that will carry you through until morning.